Good morning and welcome into Off the Bench. Nicholas Reed Mouse here. Michael Stone Shields, my esteemed producer here on a Friday morning show. We avoided the snow just a little bit. Was a little worried coming in. Thought we'd have to do a remote show, but we got lucky. Roads are clear. Stay safe this weekend as we might get some more snow here. We got a fun show for you today. We're going to have Craig Sandlin on at 9:30 Central Time. To talk about the Bengals. We're going to talk more about the Joseph Lee Burrow comments in the presser. I touched on it yesterday. Yesterday, when I talked about it, it was an open discourse. Like, I didn't know what to think about it, but the more and more I see people talking about it, the more I've kind of introspectively thought about it. I have an opinion on the whole thing, and of course, Jamar Chase came out. Jeff Passan labeled the Cincinnati Reds as the worst or the big losers of the winter meetings. We'll break into that, and we'll do a little fun buy or sell later on in the show after we talk to Craig. Bengals play the Baltimore Ravens this Sunday, which could be some snowy weather, could be some bad weather. Both basketball teams are back in action tonight or this weekend. Xavier takes on Missouri State. I forget who the University of Cincinnati plays this weekend.
Georgia.
Oh, they play Georgia. Georgia Bulldogs, the team Xavier lost on the final seconds. That was a good game. Good comeback there for the Muskies. We got a fun weekend of sports here in the town. Stone! We were just reminiscing on how many Dobies calzones you used to eat back in your Oxford days. He said, what was the number?
Well, senior year, it definitely got to a point where it was like 2 to 3 a week, which is definitely aggressive. But an Abe Lincoln at Dobies doesn't get much better than that. But when you said Joseph there, when you were kind of letting everybody know what we were going to talk about, I was a little bit worried because I thought you were going to say Osai, and we had about an hour-long conversation yesterday with Casey about that particular Bengal. But you said Burrow, so
it is worth noting that one of the questions I'm going to ask Craig later on is about Joseph Osai. So if you're watching, just prepare for that one. I'm going to ask you what we do with him later on in the show. If you guys have suggestions, you Hamiltonians, you local foodies, Stone's looking for suggestions for lunch today. I was telling him about Murchie and Basil and All Ate Up and all those places. So if you got a suggestion for Stone, put it in there, and he might take you up on that for lunch today. We used to do a fun thing on the show where we would get a big wheel, big randomizer, and put all the local places, and that's how we decide lunch every day. That was back in the good old days of Paul and Elliot and Jacob and Casey, and we'd all go out to eat for about an hour and a half and not get a whole lot done. But that was a long time ago. Let's break into the show. All right, so I mentioned it, and we're going to do another segment on this. We did a long talk yesterday about this, and as I mentioned, I didn't know what to think. Obviously, I'd watched the whole presser. When I was watching it, I was actually putting together my daughter's dresser, which is officially done. Took me about 12 hours of work, but it's officially done. Darn you, Wayfair. And we talked about it on the show yesterday, but we keep seeing more and more and more comments coming out from the national pundits, from the local guys, of what to make of Joe Burrow's comments that happened 2 days ago. So it might be old news, but I feel confident bringing it up once again because I feel like I finally got to take. Listen, when it comes to the jury of public opinion, more often than not, if everyone is saying the same opinion, if everyone is saying the same thing, then it's probably right. I have this old take when it comes to society that we figured out pretty early some no-nos, right? Like when we start to break down the rules, everyone's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't steal from people. Yeah, you probably shouldn't hurt people. Probably shouldn't kill, whatever it is. The easy stuff, when everyone agrees on things, it's probably right. But it doesn't bat 1,000. It's got a Hall of Fame batting average, but it doesn't bat 1,000. And if you listen to Dan Orlovsky, this is the beginning of the end. Nick Wright, this is, I don't have his exact quote, but this is a stage 5 fire alarm. Colin Cowherd, that's a cheap organization. He should ask to be out. And all of these national pundits are saying the same thing. Joseph Burrow is being wasted here in Cincinnati. And if Joseph Burrow cares about his legacy, he cares about his career, then he'd ask to get the heck out of Dodge. And I'm not disagreeing with that sentiment. Because when he was drafted, And pretty much every step along the way, people have said Joe Burrow is too good for Cincinnati. I'm not going to disagree because now we are entering year 3 of seeing a generational Hall of Fame talent, one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the league, certainly the best passer in the league, missing out on the postseason. What was he, 8-1 in his last 9 starts? And here we are once again on the outside looking in. Where I will disagree is that it's not going to happen. Never talked to him. Never, don't have any inside information. But everything I've seen from the way that Joe Burrow conducts himself, from the way that he has operated as a professional, makes me fully believe that we're not dealing with a Carson Palmer. We're not dealing with someone that's going to walk into Mike Brown's office and say, hey, I want to be traded. I want out of this. This ain't working. Like I said, I've nothing to back that up other than the fact that that's pretty much how he's conducted himself throughout his entire career. As for the comments themselves, I think it was just a knee-jerk reaction to what he's feeling in the moment, as we've all been. We've all done that. We've all had emotions swing us one way, and I think that there is something going on, and he's obviously not himself the way that we've seen, but he's always been a bit recluse. He's always been soft-spoken. He's always been, I don't want to say standoffish, but stoic certainly. And I'll let the national pundits, because it's not going to stop, I'll let them continue to say he should be banging on the table. But not to call him a prisoner, but I think we all know that if he does that, if he does go into Mike Brown's office, and I am wrong, and he goes, hey, I want out. I do not want to be here anymore. You guys are wasting my career. It's not working here in Cincinnati. What do you think Mike Brown's going to do? You think Mike Brown's just going to punt on the situation? Because Joe Burrow will play. He's not going to sit out. He's not Carson Palmer, guys. I know we are hurt from what has been of the past of the Bengals. But every situation, it's not history repeating itself. We aren't living in a simulation where there's a glitch in the matrix and we just keep doing the same thing over and over again. These situations are different. There's nuance. There's context. From everything I've seen, Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor have an amazing relationship. And we have, as a franchise, bent at the knee for Joe Burrow, and that's what these national pundits aren't acknowledging. As Stone has said off air, as Stone has said on air, T. Higgins was gone. When it came to the Bengals' opinion on what they should do with T. Higgins, they were out the door. They didn't want to pay him what he was worth. Because as we now get made fun of, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense roster construction-wise. But you know who wanted to keep T. Higgins around? Joe Burrow. So guess what the Bengals did? They kept T. Higgins. Mike Gesicki. Is there a reason that we should be playing Mike Gesicki $9 million? He's like our 5th highest paid guy on the team, 4th highest paid guy on the team. Is there a reason for a third option, a third target? Every good team, they just draft guys to fill that role. But you know why he's here? Because Joe Burrow wanted him here. The Bengals haven't been uber successful in protecting Joe Burrow at the line, but they've certainly tried. You can argue that the Bengals are inept, certainly. But they've done everything they can to keep this relationship copacetic. He has the most weight in that building, sans Mike Brown. He walks in and, hey, I want to go grab this guy. I want to make a push for this guy. I want to keep this guy around. Maybe we should draft. If Joe Burrow steps in and says that and there's an opportunity for it, the Bengals are going to pull the trigger. If Joe Burrow walked into the office of Mike Brown, Duke Tobin, and Zach Taylor and said, I think in our first round we should get another wide receiver, they do it. This team bends the knee at Joe. So I don't think it is I guess what I'm saying is Joe Burrow is under contract till 2029. And I fully believe that when 2029 comes around, Joseph Lee Burrow will be playing in stripes. I hope that the Bengals figure it out before then. I hope that it is a situation to where, because currently, I don't know if he signs another extension. Like, I don't know. As it currently sits, I think he plays his contract out till 2029. Then he goes and tests the free agent waters. So I hope they figure it out to where a contract extension makes a lot of sense, because it doesn't make a lick of sense right now for Joe Burrow's legacy and his career. But to sum it up, the court of public opinion is thus. Joe Burrow is being wasted. Probably true. Joe Burrow should walk in and ask to leave so that his legacy isn't tarnished, so that he can go and be a consistent Super Bowl contender. That's not happening. Don't be scared, Bengals fans, because we've seen this story before with Carson Palmer. Doesn't mean it's the same story. He's a different player. He's a different person. And this team is committed to him. And I believe that he is committed to this team, at least to the end of his contract. So not to rehash the segment that we did yesterday, not to talk about it more, and we've talked about it off air. We've talked about it in chats and whatnot. I believe fully that Joe is going to play out his contract. And even though the court of public opinion is he should go out and they can be right, I just don't see that happening, that he's going to, that this is some fire alarm to say, hey, Joe's out. Joe's done with this team. Joe wants to move on. I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, our thumbnail yesterday for the segment that went out was not great, right? It's not press the panic button, sound the alarms, overreact. No, it's not great to hear your quarterback do that, but also look where you're at as a team, right? You only have a handful of wins. And also, I think Joe's looking around at the division and going, my goodness. And let's be real here. You don't want to sit here and play the what-if game. That's fine. But if Joe was playing the whole year, the Bengals would be in the driver's seat in the North, and we'd be talking about a home playoff game at Paycor Stadium, and everybody would be fired up. Right, that's just the reality of the situation when you look at how Pittsburgh and Baltimore are playing. So I think there's an added level to his frustration, because he's like, man, this year, I mean, it didn't take – if he's going in the year, you're probably thinking, it might take 12, 13 wins to outdo Baltimore for this division, and obviously that's not how it transpired. So I think there's an additional level of frustration with Joe when it comes to that. And also he's not going to, not play or retire or request a trade or anything like that. And even if he did the unthinkable, and let's say next year goes horrible and he's like, you know what, screw this, I don't want to play on my contract, I want out of here, Mike Brown's going to laugh in his face. He's going to be, it doesn't matter. You give Mike Brown 5 first-round picks, he's not going to move off Joe Burrow, right? The only chance that Joe Burrow is not a Bengal is if he doesn't get an extension or doesn't sign an extension, plays out his contract, and then ultimately decides to be a free agent and then leaves. But Cincinnati's going to tag him at that point, right? So I don't think there's a realistic world where he leaves anytime in the near future. But at the same time, it's not great. You don't want to hear your star quarterback, have that kind of attitude at the podium, say those type of things, get everybody worked up. And unfortunately for Cincinnati and Duke Tobin, you're going to have a bunch of teams calling, right, this offseason after those comments. The national pundits, they've said some crazy things. One thing they're not wrong about is everybody else's ears in the league perked up, and they're going to be dialing the phone and say, hey, what can we do to get Joe Burrow? And it's just going to be a lot of declines or a lot of, oh, yeah, we're not interested from Duke Tobin and company.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this before. It's of my opinion that when you're our general man, when you're in charge of roster construction, you are not doing your job well enough if people are calling you up and asking. It is your responsibility to hear out everything. And you could tell them, we're not trading Joe. But it is your responsibility, because there is a price for everything in this world. And if a team wants to commit their next 12 first-round picks for Joe Burrow, then, can you say no to that? there's a price for everything. So I do think that if they're going to start calling you up, but we know that it's not going to happen. We know it is, even though it is eerily similar to what we've seen with Carson Palmer, and where we have one of the true best quarterbacks in the league, and he's not happy and not playing consistently. He's getting hurt, all those things. It's not the same situation. I don't think it's going to be. And as I mentioned yesterday, the only world in which I see Joe Burrow being traded is if that we are nearing the end of the contract. It's pretty clear that we are heading down this same path of, hey, we're not playing well enough. And it's 2028, 2029, and Joe Burrow sits down with the team and says, just so you know, I plan to be a free agent. You can do with that information what you want. And you say, yeah, they'll just tag him and play it out. But if I was them, and that's a serious conversation that is had in 2029 when the team's not looking like a true contender, then it'd make a lot of sense to move off him in that final year and see what you can get for one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But that's a long ways away. And I'll just speak it frankly when I tell everyone to calm the F down. Calm the F down. It is not, don't read too much into this. It is just a precipitation of frustration on all accords from the season, on Joe Burrow's accord, on all our accord, and what everyone on the outside is seeing, that it has not gone well for the last 3 years, and it feels like there needs to be some significant change. Just calm down. Jamar Chase said it himself. We are reading too much into this. He smiles every day at practice. You guys are making a mountain out of a molehill. What also might be a mountain out of a molehill is Jeff Passan, national reporter for Major League Baseball. When given, and everyone loves to see the grades, right? Everyone, after the trade deadline, who won this trade? What's the grade that you get on the trade deadline? What's the grade that you get from winter meetings, which is oftentimes where the most explosive moves happen in the Major League Baseball's offseason. And obviously, that's where we got the news earlier this week that Kyle Schwarber, even though there was a lot of smoke, there's so much smoke around Kyle Schwarber and the Reds, he goes to the Philadelphia Phillies, 5-year, $150 million. And also one thing, I saw Bob Nightingale, I believe, put out an article that the Reds matched that offer. I ain't buying that. I don't know if that's been rescinded since, but this is the same Bob Nightingale that reported that the Cubs got Zach Gallen, which just isn't true. So he's not the most accurate guy. So that's beside the point. Jeff Passan, when asked who's the biggest loser from the winter meetings, his answer, Cincinnati Reds. And his opinion on that comes from the fact that the Reds, they're coming off their first postseason since 2013 in a full season, not a COVID season. Oh, well, there was a lot of smoke. There was a lot of rumors. The player himself says he'd be very interested in coming into town. And does that player fit what the Bengals or what the Reds are trying to do? Yeah. What do the Reds need? Power. Where do they need it? From the left side of the plate. What does Kyle Schwarber do? Power. Where does he hit from? The left side of the plate. He called them the biggest loser because it was a chance to commit. They had the money. They have the money. They obviously had enough money to offer 120. It's very rare that the Reds, or most small market teams, in fact, will ever have the opportunity to get a player in free agency that has the caliber of Kyle Schwarber. We know that in this sport, not everything's created equal. And they had a legitimate shot to not only get a player of that caliber, to not only fit a piece that looks like a puzzle, that fits right into the puzzle, to get a proven leader that other fan bases, other GMs rave about, and to get someone that's from the area that the fan base would be excited about. And they swung and missed. It feels like the biggest rug pull that could have happened for the Reds, to where everyone was as excited as I've seen them since they made that string of free agent signings after their miraculous 2023 season. People were legitimately excited for the prospect of bringing Schwarber home. And Jeff Passan hit the nail right on the head. They are the biggest losers from the winter meetings. Because if fan morale means anything, it is as low as it's been in a while, and it should be much higher based off the season they had, their first postseason run in a full season since 2013. Because now Reds fans know, as the executives know, that this big splash acquisition, it's probably not going to happen. Or at least it's going to happen via trade. It was a chance to sit at the table with the big dogs, and the Reds were unable to, were not committed to bringing Kyle Schwarber home. Stone, I don't know if you had an opinion on Jeff Passan's. We saw that we tweeted this out about the Reds being the biggest losers at the biggest moment in this offseason.
Look, it's unfortunate they didn't get Schwarber, but I don't know. The biggest loser, that seems a little aggressive to me. I mean, should the Reds be dragged through the mud a little bit by not getting him? Sure, but as we mentioned on the show, it's a fair offer, right? 125. I think you can make the argument that Philadelphia overpaid for Kyle Schwarber, and I think what ties into that biggest loser isn't just missing on Schwarber. It's the fact that they haven't done anything else besides that, which obviously isn't ideal. So I don't know about biggest loser, but yeah, they deserve a little flack for how they've handled things to this point. And, you know, my biggest worry after they made the playoffs was they're going to just try to run it back with the same team, and unfortunately it looks like we're headed in that direction once again.
Yeah, it's just the reason that I agree with him is because it's the same reason that they were in this position in the first place. This was a chance. This was an opportunity for the Reds. You watch Chatterbox Reds, and you know Kirby is talking about this is how often do the Reds have the opportunity to sign a player like this? How often? Listen to any sports talk show in this town. How often are the Reds in this opportunity, coming off a successful season? Year one of Terry Francona. They go to the postseason. You would have a chance to add to the team. And you could say, yeah, the Phillies overspent. But it just was a chance to sit at the table with the big dogs. A rare opportunity, and you can't let that slip through your fingers. And the Reds did. Reds did.
Yeah, do you think you have them as the biggest loser just because of not getting Schwarber, or just the fact they haven't really done anything else?
I have them as the biggest loser from the winter meetings because no other team had a swing negatively in terms of public reception, which, by the way, means not a lick. I know I'm making a big what to do about it all. It means not a lick that fans are now depressed. And the national media, Jeff Passan's talking about how they're the biggest loser. It means not a lick, but I do agree. Because if we are giving grades, if we are saying this is a winner, this is a loser, if you got to win the press conference, then the Reds certainly lost. Now we know that the wins and losses come on the field from March to September and October. That's when the real winning and losing is done. But if we are giving grades out, if we are saying that this team, which team won, which team lost, the winter meetings where all the GMs get together and they make moves and they make deals, and even though the hot stove was a little colder this December, it just feels like no one took a bigger gut punch. No one got put on the mat quite like the Reds. Because for 2 weeks, all Reds fans could talk about every single day is every time there was a new report, I think this might be happening. This is happening, isn't it? This is exciting. This is new. This is something unique. We have a piece of the puzzle that fits in like a glove. And they didn't go to it. They didn't get it done. They weren't committed to getting it done. I think that's the point. And you can say the Reds don't have the money. The Reds, because they are a fractured fan base. The Reds have a big fan base, but it's not geographically located to Cincinnati to where people can easily fill up the ballpark and sell those tickets. We got fans in Northern Ohio. We got fans in Kentucky and Tennessee. We got fans everywhere, right? The Carolinas, because they were the farthest south team for a long time. The Reds were. It was between the Braves and the Reds. That's where the fan bases were. If you're in Tennessee, you had to choose between the Braves and the Reds. But they had a chance to kind of galvanize it all.
Would you want your Cubbies to pay $150 for him?
For Kyle Schwarber?
Yeah.
So here's my opinion on this. I don't care about numbers, money at all. I should care, because that if you fail one place, you got to make up for the money elsewhere. But it's also not my money. So that's where I've always not really cared when people talk about, oh, you spent too much money, that's a bad contract. I don't care. It's my money. And obviously the Jamier Candelario signing, Mike Moustakas signing, put the Reds back. Set the Reds back, because now they're committing money to these guys that just aren't playing for the team anymore. They committed money. So I understand why you care, but I also don't care. Yeah, I would have paid $150 million for Kyle Schwarber, because in my mind it's all made up, and it's like, who's lining it anyways? Craig Sandlin, 9:30 Central Time, as I promised here, coming on this show. I think he is quiet, at least in my ear, so maybe if you got the mic coming through there.
You should say something, Craig. I think we should be good.
Yeah.
We should be good. You got me?
Oh, yeah, I got you. It's just
come
quiet.
on, Reader.
It's just a
Reader.
little quiet.
You want me to talk louder, Reed?
No, please don't talk loud. Here's what I'll say, Craig. We started off this show. We talked about it yesterday. It's making the national moves, or making the national rounds, about the Joe Burrow presser from a few days ago. We talked about it in our chat as, hey, what's going on here? Seems like a sad puppy, and I'm not talking about the Pokemon cards that he talked about at the end of the presser. What was your opinion, as we haven't talked to you, what was your opinion of kind of reading into Joe Burrow's comments at that presser?
Man, isn't it just like Joe Burrow to make these cryptic comments that nobody knows exactly what they mean? Like, he does this all the time. Here's the thing. My initial reaction and the reaction of the national media is different, right? So I took this probably a different way than other people did, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's completely unrelated. But my very first thought when I heard Joe's comments was, all right, you just lost to the Buffalo Bills. I'm wondering if he's seeing the writing on the wall that Zach Taylor may not be back next year. I'm wondering if he's seeing changes otherwise that may be happening, whether that's a T. Higgins trade that many of you guys have talked about, whether that's something else, I don't know. But he talks a lot about, if I'm not having fun, why am I doing this, right? And I think he enjoys playing for Zach Taylor. And I know that he likes him as a person and as a coach, but he also loves to win. And that's the real question here is, okay, well, is he to the point now where he's finally over this whole playing for Zach Taylor thing? Is he finally ready to move forward with that? I think there's a lot of pieces to it. And he said it's both personal and professional. And that's because I think there are personal relationships involved with his profession. And so whether that means Zach Taylor may finally be on the hot seat like we've been asking for, whether that's just literally he's tired of losing and getting sacked and all of these other things, maybe. I saw the stat yesterday on ESPN about him and Andrew Luck and how he's played 13 games less and been sacked 27 more times and all these things. I don't know that that's necessarily where this is all coming from, but I do think that Joe probably sees the writing on the wall after the loss to Buffalo that, hey, this isn't a playoff season yet again after last season's really disappointing outcome. And he's trying to figure out, how do I have fun again? And that means getting to the playoffs and winning football games. And that may mean Zach Taylor isn't the head coach in 2026.
That's an interesting take that I don't think anyone got there yet, is that you think that, and correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, that his reaction there was because you think that he might be seeing the writing on the wall of Zach Taylor being gone at the end of this year. And
I think he came into this Buffalo game expecting to be able to run the table read and to be able to win out and get into the playoffs and potentially show that, hey, when we're all healthy, we're a playoff team. And that includes Zach Taylor, that includes his front office, that includes this defense, that includes everybody in the organization, and then they go out and they lose in the way that they did, and he probably feels a certain way because he is largely responsible for that loss because of the interceptions that happened late in the game. And I think he's probably taking it pretty hard. And I think he's also understanding that not making the playoffs this year, in a year that it was right there for them. And obviously the injury played into that. The defense played into that. All of these things played into it. He's got to recognize that something's got to change. And whether that's Zach Taylor, whether that's the fact that he continually fights for his guys, the guys that he is friends with and wants to be around, I don't know. But I 100% don't think that it's straight, I'm tired of losing, or straight, I'm tired of getting sacked, or anything like that. I think it is, there's got to be changes made, and he's grappling with what that means for them as an organization and for him as a football player.
On Chatterbox Bengals, you've made your opinion known very loud and clear that you do not want Zach Taylor to be the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, really going into this game this Sunday. But for the future, if Joe wants him there, if Joe feels more comfortable with Zach Taylor and says, yes, I want Zach to continue to be here, are you cool with letting Zach Taylor continue here, or do you think it's time to pony up and say, like, I know you guys are close, I know you like playing for him, but we've got to make a change here?
That's a good question, and I think it's a valid question because I do think that Joe has significant pull as it pertains to what happens in this organization with the Brown family, and obviously we've seen that with T and with Jamar and with Gesicki and with Trey. And I think that ultimately he will have a say in this decision. If ultimately Joe Burrow wants Zach Taylor as his head coach, I think there's some conditions that need to happen. And I've got two in the top of my mind that I think I would want to see in order to be comfortable with Zach Taylor coming back. I could be convinced that only one of them has to happen, but I'd prefer to see both. The one that absolutely has to happen if you bring Zach Taylor back is you need a real GM. And
Agreed.
All due respect to Katie Blackburn, to Duke Tobin, to Zach Taylor, it's very clear that this team has not had the success in the draft and in free agency to build a winning franchise. And if that's going to happen and you're going to bring back Zach, you need someone who is all in on player personnel and building an organization with Zach, with Katie, with Duke, if they're going to be around, to build this into a annual competitor. And the other one that I feel pretty strongly about, but ultimately understand that if Joe Burrow doesn't feel this way, that I could be convinced otherwise, I'd like him to add an offensive coordinator that actually that calls the plays. I think that we've seen week in and week out that Zach Taylor's ability to be a head coach and an offensive coordinator diminishes his ability to do either. And so whether it's play calls coming in late and forcing us to use timeouts, whether it's him using challenges that maybe he shouldn't have used or otherwise, I just think that he isn't able to truly be the head coach that he could or should be because he's focused on calling the plays on the game day. And so those two things are my kind of requests. If Zach Taylor is going to come back in 2026, 100% player personnel has to change. Like, there's zero negotiation on that. If the head coach, being Zach Taylor today, is going to continue to manage your organizational personnel and have a heavy input, he can't be it, right? Like we saw Marvin. Marvin had some pretty good success with free agency and with drafting. Zach Taylor has not had that. And so that would be my request. And we'll see what Joe wants. I mean, ultimately, Joe Burrow's number one priority, aside of anything, is to win football games. And so if he believes that he can do that with Zach Taylor, then so be it. But the way that this organization is built top to bottom today is not built for winning a Super Bowl, and certainly not for sustaining success.
I think I disagree with you, Craig, in one regard, and that's unique because we normally align in most things when it comes to Cincinnati Bengals. And the first one is I do agree with you, and we need a general manager for the mere fact of if I'm going to continue doing Chatterbox Bengals and doing podcasts, I would love to never say the phrase de facto general manager ever again in my life. I would like to just even if you just change Duke Tobin's title to general manager, I would at least like that, so I never have to say de facto again. I will say this about what you said about Zach Taylor, and it's been as well as your opinion's been made about Zach Taylor, mine has been made too, where it says, yeah, I don't think that he's good enough as a head coach to continue here, and clearly something's not getting him over the hump. I've always said, though, that this offense is high potent, and it could be because of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe, and we know that's true, but also Zach Taylor gets credit as the play caller, because he is doing that, and there's things that drive me nuts, like the timeouts because we're not getting the plays in quick enough. But I look at the rest of the league, and I see teams that are winning. They oftentimes not only have an offensive-minded head coach, but he calls the plays. You look at Liam Cohen in Jacksonville. You look at LaFleur in Green Bay. You look at Sean McVay in Los Angeles. Obviously, Andy Reid in Kansas City, not winning this year, but they've won a lot of games. So I don't necessarily agree with the fact that if Zach Taylor's going to be here, he can't call head coach. He can't call the plays because, to be honest, the only reason I want Zach Taylor here, if there's any reason whatsoever, is because I do want him calling plays. Like if he's going to continue here, him not calling plays, then what the heck are we doing?
Here's what I say though, Reed. We've for 6 years now talked about Zach Taylor, the culture builder. Right?
Yeah.
And that the whole idea is that the reason that people like to play for him is because he's okay in the locker room and that he's a nice guy and that, quite frankly, I think he's kind of a pushover. But nonetheless, he's built a culture where people are happy for the most part. Like, that is what it is. I hate it, but it is what it is. But the truth of the matter is that for as many coaches that are out there that are offensive minded, that are calling their own plays, there's also just as many out there that aren't. I mean, you look at other teams that are also have a true coordinator that is calling the plays on a day-to-day basis. Like, and it's both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. I mean,
how many offensive-minded head coaches aren't calling their plays and are being successful?
I don't know. I'd have to
Nick
go through the
Sirianni.
list and
Sirianni doesn't. He does. Dan Campbell recently, but he's calling plays now. It's a short list. Like if you're
Brian Callahan gave up his play calling.
Yeah, it was a great thing. You're right. There are teams that are winning with offensive coordinators calling the plays, but those teams oftentimes are teams with Mike Vrabel, who's a defensive guy, or Sean McDermott, who's a defensive guy, or D'Amico Ryan. Like, it's the defensive guys that do that. If there's an offensive head coach and they're winning, it's because that offensive guy is calling the plays. So I guess I'll disagree.
But I would also like, just in terms of like a slight pushback, is that, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but a majority of those names that you're talking about, and I'm not talking about Liam Cohen, but obviously you talk about Andy Reid, like they have a long history of success here, and they've been doing this for a long time.
Right.
Zach Taylor has had 6 years to try and figure this out. And so at what point do we say, okay, well, we're having too many mishaps otherwise, I need you to be a head coach? Like, we've had this conversation before, Reed, where he's basically neglecting the defensive side of the ball,
no doubt,
because he has to be calling plays while the defense is on the sideline. So he's not involved in that side of the ball for the most part. We talk about how highly people thought about Brian Callahan and we wanted him to hand over play calling to him. We talk now about how highly people think about Dan Pitcher and people want him to turn over the play calling to him. Like, how do we know that the offense is going to take such a step back by handing over play calling that Zach Taylor's quality of success is not going to be the same or increase? Because as much as we talk about how great the offense is, we also sit right here after 90% of games and complain about a certain portion of the game where Zach just got ultra conservative or just got stupid with the ball because of his mindset. Like, he talks about this is a group effort, and there's a lot of discussion that goes into every play call. Well, those are the reasons why we're sitting here having this conversation, because those conversations take too long to get the play call in and we have to burn timeouts, or he's not focusing on other areas of the game or whatever it may be. And so at some point, and this is why I've advocated for a defensive minded head coach that just brings in coordinators to call the game. But I just don't see the progress from Zach Taylor going from this offensive mind, which again, 75 to 90% of the game, I agree with what he's doing. And I think he's turned this Bengals offense into one of, if not the most feared offenses in all of the NFL. But to your point, how much of that is Zach Taylor and how much of that is being carried by Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, this offensive line that they've put together that's probably the best in their time here in Cincinnati, Mike Gesicki. Like, if this offense wasn't churning, of course, everybody would immediately say it.
Right.
Like, this offense is too loaded not to be good. So, yeah, Zach Taylor has this offense churning. But, again, how much of it is Zach Taylor and how much of it is the playmakers that he has on that side of the ball? We don't know. And that's why part of me says get it off of his plate, let him focus on the entire organization top to bottom, and let's see what happens with Dan Pitcher calling the play calls.
I hear you. I understand what you're saying. I understand your opinion.
This is
and
the same conversation
where you're coming from. But I will respectfully agree to disagree, because if Zach Taylor is the head coach of this team and he's not running the offense, then I don't know what the hell he's doing. Like, I don't have any opinion. I don't have any confidence in anything else other than he's people like playing for him. Outside of that, I don't see what he would bring to the table in this town. So you were going to say something to add to this?
We'll ask the same question that we ask pretty regularly, Reed. If Zach Taylor got fired tomorrow, how many people would hire him as a head coach, and how many people would hire him as an offensive coordinator?
I'm cool. I am cool with. I think he'd get hired as an offensive coordinator if he wants the job.
100%.
I don't think
he would be unemployed for long at all.
Correct.
I really don't. He just wouldn't get another head coaching job immediately.
Yes, unless it was like a college job or something like that, to like a mid-tier college. Like, they might take a stab
or
at
a trash organization like like the Titans.
Correct. You're right. You're right in that regard. And listen, my opinion is that I don't want Zach Taylor here. Like, I want to get a big boy. Like, if Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, one of those names come available, I want to throw everything we can at those guys. I'm on board with that. Now, there is cause. I do have a little bit of pause if and I don't want to bend the knee always to Joe Burrow, but if he's saying, hey, I want to keep Zach around here, I'm okay with that too. But I will disagree with you in the fact that if Zach Taylor's here, he needs to be calling plays, because that's pretty much all he does well. Let me ask you this. Let's turn the page to a new topic, and Stone's going to wither away when I ask this question. We had about an hour-long conversation about Joseph Asai yesterday off air. Joseph Asai is making about $7 million. He's the word that Casey and Stone use is he's having a breakout. I'd pump back on the phrase breakout. He is due to be a free agent, and I think he is going to make a decent amount of money. Is there a range? First off, what do you think Joseph Asai's market's going to be in free agency? What do you think it's going to look like? And are you comfortable with the market that you deem with the Bengals bringing him back?
So it's an interesting conversation that is bound to happen for someone who is on a 1-year deal, right? Joseph Osai this year is on a 1-year contract making $7 million. Okay.
Yep.
So let's start with that conversation. And it was at the time basically kind of portrayed as this, this prove it deal, right? So let's look at last year's numbers. And he played 573 snaps. He had 31 total tackles, 5 sacks, 10 hits, 16 hurries. Okay. This year so far, 590 total snaps. Okay. So 17 more snaps. So we're pretty close to like the output, right? Mm-hmm. So last year he had 31 tackles. This year he has 42. Last year he had 5 sacks. This year he has 5 sacks. Last year he had 10 hits. This year he has 8 hits. Last year he had 16 hurries. This year he has 29 hurries. Now, is somebody going to pay Joseph Osai? Probably.
Yeah.
But should they pay him as a D-end 1? Not a chance. Not a chance. And so that's where the conversation has to be had is if the Bengals are willing to bring him back on, I don't know, that like $10 to $12 million range probably, I'm all for that. My problem is that he can't be your solution to the D-end and to the pass rush issue that this Bengals defense has had as your only solution. Like I think what I've been hearing from some fans is like, let's rock with Miles Murphy, Joseph Osai, and Cedric Johnson in 2026 and see what they can do.
Don't forget Shamar.
That.
Don't forget
Shamar if he does anything. Great. And Shamar Stewart if he plays. I'm okay bringing him back. I'm afraid that the Bengals are going to do a Cincinnati Reds move where they bring him back and act like he's like their big signing on the defensive front. And it's just, that doesn't move me, right? So would I like to have him back? Sure. Would he have even more success if Trey Hendrickson was on the other side taking more pressure away from him and you could move Miles Murphy inside every once in a while and kind of move these guys around the line? Sure. But I don't think rocking in 2026 with those 4 guys as your primary pass rushers is going to get the job done. And so that's where I'm in a bit of a pickle where if you give him $12 million a year or whatever that number is, I worry that would be your one and only move on the D line or at least at D edge. And then you'd be left with a similar situation that you're in this year. So would I bring him back? Sure. Would I give him a multi-year contract? Sure. Would I do it at a level where he's like my primary pass rusher? Not a chance.
So Sports Track, also, I want to give you kudos because you took the jab at the Cincinnati Reds. I didn't. That's normally my job. You took the jab there. So kudos to that. So this conversation came up. Sports Track has currently the guess of what Joseph Osai's AAV is going to be in free agency this year at 14 and a half. I'll let you know about our little wager. I made a wager with Casey. Casey seems to think that Joseph Osai is going to get $20 million, which God bless any team that gives Joseph Osai $20 million AAV next year. But if you look at the edge rushers that are going to be available at free agent next year, it's not a big, intriguing list. Trey Hendrickson's going to be up there. 36-year-old Khalil Mack might be there. Joey Bosa is going to be there. And then behind that, Joseph Osai at 25 years old is probably the most intriguing candidate. So I've often said this. I've said this all week. I've said it in weeks prior. I believe the Bengals are a little lazy. I think they're lazy, and they like bringing guys that have been around. So if he's AAV is around $14 million, I'm scared that the Bengals are going to look around and go, yeah, okay. There's not many options. I'll go with the guy that's been around here that other teams want and that he has a market for. We'll bring him back and give him $14 million, which, candidly speaking, I don't know how I feel about that. If what you suggested, 10, 12, I'm cool with that. But I look at this defense, and I know that it doesn't work in its current capacity. So when it doesn't work, I am of the opinion that they should go and look elsewhere for multiple roles. And if one of them is Joseph Osai, I'm not cool with giving Joseph Osai $16, $17 million to be what you said. I'm in agreement with you that, hey, if he's going to be your edge rusher one, it's probably not a good look on this defense, although we know this defense isn't going to have a good look anyways. So we are in opinion there.
I know you like your games, Reed. So let me give you some edge rushers. I'm going to give you an edge rusher. You tell me if you think Joseph Osai should make more or less than that edge rusher.
In what regard? AAV next year or guaranteed money overall?
Sure. I'm just so I'm on. You guys might have done this already. I'm on 2025's edge contracts average per year rankings right now. Okay. Did you do this yesterday when you guys were going through this?
I was on Sport Track looking at edge rushers that are going to be free agents this year.
Okay, so this is current contracts. So let's say, all right, so we know like this year, right, Trey Hendrickson, $29 million, according to the APY. Okay.
Yep.
Micah Parsons, $46.5 million.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So we're nowhere in that range. So let's just start a little bit lower than that. Joseph Osai or Rashawn Gary, who would you rather have?
You're putting me on a spot here. Because
Gary.
I'm taking Rashawn Gary. Yeah.
Correct. I this isn't like some sort of like argument. I'm just we're gonna use this information to try to narrow in on where we think Joseph Osai should end up last year.
Okay.
Joseph Osai or Alex Highsmith?
Highsmith.
Okay. Joseph Osai or Hassan Reddick?
Hassan Reddick, even though he's a little older.
Okay. Joseph Osai or Joey Bosa?
Joey Bosa, even with all the injuries.
I get
Danico
Autry.
I get the point. I get the point that you're trying to make here. What is it? Is it that Joseph Osai is? That's
a great question. Let's just go through the ones that I just said, or maybe even a couple more. Rashawn Gary's making $24 million this year.
Yep.
There's even if we go down the list, George Karlaftis is making $22 million per year.
Right.
Bradley Chubb is making $18 million this year. Alex Highsmith is at $17 million this year. Harold Landry with the Patriots is making 14.5. Hassan Reddick is making 14. Joey Bosa is making 12.6. Abdul Carter is obviously on his rookie contract, so take that off. DeMarcus Lawrence, 10.8. Danico Autry, 10.
The reason
Vitor Gross-Matos signed he's at $9 million.
We are in agreement when it comes to Joseph Osai that anything north of probably 14, whatever Sport Track had it at, the guess on his, I'm out on because he's here and it's not working while he's here. So I'm not going to spend more money for it to continue to not work.
I think 14 would be an absolute stretch budget for him. Like if you came to me and said, "Hey, we signed Joseph Osai for 3 years, $14 million per year," I'd probably cringe a little bit because I think it's an overpay, but I would understand it.
Yeah.
But
there's going to be,
I think that puts you in a realm where that's your only DN signing.
Right. That's the only when it comes to that. He's 25 years old. He's having the best year of his career currently. His first time really getting a lot of snaps. So I think there will be a hungry team out there that there will be a competitive market for Joseph Osai. There will be, because he's young, he's playing better. But as I told Casey yesterday, I don't want an edge rusher one that has been in the league for 5 years, whatever he has. And he has 13 career sacks. Like he's had 5 this year. He's playing better. He's getting back there more. But I'm out on it. If we could bring him back for 10, 12 million, I know the market has changed. Let me ask you this then, and it's the final thing because we're running out of time here. When you look at this defense,
so much for your buy and sell.
Yeah, we're not doing that, which is good because I only had a couple anyways. When we look at this defense, and as I mentioned, it's not working. Look at the 11 starters. You can look at who's here. How many players are you comfortable with guaranteeing a spot on the defense next year? Going, hey, you're back.
Guaranteeing a spot?
Correct. Whether it be because we kind of have to because we drafted him like Miles Murphy. Like, I'm not guaranteeing him a spot, but he's going to be on the team next year.
A spot on the team or a spot as a starter?
Starter. Because I look at it, I'll just tell you this. I look at the defense, and I see like 3 guys. I see DJ Turner, Juan Drago Turner. I see Dax Hill. I'm cool with giving a spot. I see I know Miles Murphy's going to get a spot because he's going to. Outside of that, I think it's pretty much open. I think the other 8 spots. I
think it should be. I think it should be open, but knowing the Bengals, I would argue that it's not.
That third linebacker spot
is probably. I think Jordan Battle is probably written in.
Okay.
I would argue that. I would say one of Demetrius Knight Jr. or Barrett Carter is penciled in.
I think they'll be the third.
I don't know if I'm ready to give
rotating
both of them, but
correct.
So one of those 2 will be guaranteed a spot, and then maybe Miles Murphy is probably it, along with DJ and Dax Hill.
So the reason I bring that up,
you're probably needing to address 6 to 7 spot. spots on the team.
We've done it on back-to-back shows now. So the reason I'll put this in the final few minutes of the show is according to Casey, I haven't looked this up. Casey's normally the numbers guy. He said they're going to have about $60 million to work with in free agency and stuff like that, somewhere along that range.
And you guys are farther ahead than I am, somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I look at the offense, and I start thinking around about, okay, how many spots need to be replaced here? And I'm not sure if any of them do. Like, I genuinely look at that offense, and I'm like, I'm cool. Chase Brown, Joe Burrow, offensive line. Maybe bring back Dalton Reisner again. But other than that, maybe you need to have another option wide receiver late in the draft. I look at the defense, and there's like 8 spots. So I start thinking, all right, we got $60 million. They have to get a free agent linebacker, a top-end guy. They have to, because it's currently not working with there, and I'm okay, or at least I understand that Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight are going to get one of those spots next year. But we have to get a veteran there. I think we have to get a safety in the free agency, and I think we have to get someone on the line. And then the rest of it is we're going to be spending draft capital towards it, because the Bengals are in a luxury position in the fact that you look at their offense, there's not many needs there. Backup running back, Dalton Reisner coming back, another lineman, but other than that, it's pretty much shored up to where they can put their entire focus for another consecutive offseason at the defense. And the one virtue that they have, which is as opposed to what they did last year, to where, yeah, there was a heavy emphasis on the defense last year, you're not worrying about the big contracts that you had to deal with last year. You're not worrying about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson. You're wiping the floor with all those because T and Jamar are here. Trey's gone, and you can put sole focus on how to fix this defense, which at least gives me a little bit of optimism to where you talked about Zach Taylor. You want him to focus on one thing and not have to do a whole bunch of roles. Well, at least Duke Tobin or whoever the de facto GM is going into this offseason has one focus on his mind, and it's how to make this gosh darn defense do anything of note. All right.
Yeah, 100%. I'm seeing anywhere from low 50s to high 50s. I mean, Trey Hendrickson alone is going to free up 30 million of it, right? So, I mean, yeah, I'm with you guys. I mean, there's no argument for me, certainly. I mean, the defense was supposed to be the priority going into last offseason, and our big splash signing was TJ Slate. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I think that's ultimately the biggest question here, is that this Bengals team historically likes to rely on the draft and doesn't make a ton of like big splashy signings. But if they're going to do it, this offseason is a great time to do it, because they'll have plenty of room to be able to dedicate those resources. And there's very clearly holes. I think a lot of it, and this is always the tough part, is what can you address in the draft, especially if you're picking in the top 10. Versus what do you need to go out and get on the free agent market? Because we already know that linebackers, which we know is a need, is traditionally a position that needs to develop a couple of years before they're ready to really be a star. So it's like, where can you really get impact players in that draft? A lot of people are high on Caleb Downs, a number of D linemen that are expected to be available in that range. So what can you address in the draft, and what can you address in free agency, and how do you address free agency and then adjust your philosophy in the draft? Because this Bengals team has to get away from this whole idea of like the best athlete available. And they've done that for a number of years now, and it just doesn't work for them. So Shamar Stewart's a freak athlete, but production wasn't there. So how do we adjust our approach in that side too, to make sure that we're getting people that can actually come in and have an immediate impact on the team?
Craig, thank you so much for spending 30 minutes with me today. It's been a long time since we talked, because I haven't been doing the watch-alongs. You're doing the watch-along again this Sunday. Thank you so much for helping out. My family has a baby shower, and I don't know why they did it on a Sunday, but we're doing it on a Sunday. So thank you so much for helping out.
Nothing going on that day anyway, right?
Right. Thank you so much. Look forward to more Chatterbox Bengals stuff in the future. Craig Salin, Chatterbox Bengals, Chatterbox Reds, the adjunct professor of Chatterbox Sports, as I like to call him from time to time. Before I get going, because I know I've overstepped my time. Not that time is of essence.
All good.
Not that time is of essence here on the show. They want me to read a couple of super chats, so I'll go ahead and do that. Nate Seltzer, member for 21 months. We are going to do box lunch today, by the way, guys. Duke the Puke Tobin is the real problem. If we fire Zach but keep Mr. Puke, we will not see any changes made. If we fire Puke and keep Zach, we will see changes. We need senile Mr. Brown to realize that. Yeah, I think if you polled Bengals fans across the board and you said you get to make one sweeping change to the team, you get to change one, I guess, fire or release one player, I think the overwhelming majority would see the de facto general manager, Duke Tobin, out. So I think you're right. I think if we want to see significant change going in this year, we've got to. I don't even care if he's still there. We just need a new voice. We need to hire an actual general manager, a new voice to at least be a part of the big decision makings. Someone new from the outside that has actual weight. That's not just talking and no one's listening to them. They do their own thing. Someone that has actual weight in the decision making would go a long way. Justin Edgel, $5 super chat. I assume this is when we're talking about Joe. Joe wants out. And then he rambles on, goes, wife and I are watching The Beast and Me. Then I put my beast in. Then we get the ellipses. So a little entendre. Two entendres there from Justin Edgel. I've seen The Beast in Me. I watched the first episode. It was intriguing. I've got too many shows on the plate. As we currently sit, so I can't watch them all. I'm still trying to catch up on several shows on Apple TV, so I'll get back to The Beast in Me here sooner or later. I don't know if Joe wants out. I don't think Joe wants out. Stone Shield show coming up. Stone, what are we covering on the Stone Shield show?
Well, we'll talk Bengals and Ravens. That was great. You and Craig going for about 30 minutes there, but I don't think you guys said the word Baltimore or Raven one time throughout that 30-minute.
There's bigger
spiel.
things. There's bigger fish. Bigger fish to fry. We are. You can hold on to your little silly hope that the Bengals are going to do anything. I'm done. I'm going to watch every game. I'm going to be excited.
Yeah.
But I've given up on the wins and the losses until it's about 12 o'clock on Sunday.
Yeah, that's fair. So we'll talk about that. Sharon Moore will roll through some replacements. We'll talk about what Cowherd and Orlovsky had to say about Joe Burrow. And we've got our best bets of the weekend as well, as always on Friday. You got any good plays for me this week, Reed?
Bengals money line. I don't gamble a whole lot anymore. Other things locked in on, like finishing a nursery and all that fun stuff. But Stone, I'll see you on Monday. Stay warm. Are you gonna tailgate even if it snows on Sunday? You don't tailgate a whole lot, do you? You're mostly just a game guy.
I mean, a little bit, not as much as I used to, I would say. But yeah, it's all about the game.
Okay. Yeah. When you do tailgate, where's your spot?
Probably the lot, like right by Paycor. Right across the street from Paycor. Yeah.
Oh!
What?
Oh!
You don't like that one?
He's at the lot right by Paycor, man.
Wait, is that some crazy experience?
Well, that's where the big money is spent.
I wouldn't say that at all.
Look at this guy.
There's some creatures in that lot.
I normally park like on like.
I didn't say I parked there, Reader. I didn't say I parked there.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Look at this guy. He gets to tailgate next to Paycor. I'm like a half mile beyond even Longworth.
I didn't say I parked there, Reader.
See, this is why you have bigger private school vibes than I do.
Oh, goodness.
I have a good show, Stone.
All right.
I'll say this.
Yeah.
I put this in the chat multiple times before. My goal, how I grade my show from time to time, is if the chat is locked into what we're talking about and if they're commenting on what we're talking about. I was unsuccessful today as I looked over and they're talking about the box office from Zootopia 2. See you guys on Monday. Who Day. Thanks, guys, so much. Love y'all. Bye.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Friday, December 12th, the end of another great week here at Chatterbox Sports. Had some good guests on yesterday. Richard Pitino on with Reed Mouse on Off the Bench. Travis Steele was on with me at the 11 o'clock hour yesterday. Both of those interviews are out and on our YouTube channel. Also, our social team did a great job at clipping those up as well. You can check out Chatterbox Sports on Twitter to see some of those clips. But really appreciate Coach Pitino and Coach Steele for making some time for us here at Chatterbox Sports yesterday. Also had Craig Sandlin on the show today during Off the Bench with Reed. That interview will be out. Not really an interview with Craig, all right? That Chatterbox Bengals content, I guess I should say, will be out a little bit later this afternoon, so make sure you check that out if you missed it. But appreciate everyone, as always. A friendly reminder to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. We have hit 21,000 subscribers here at the channel. We are now on our way to 22,000 subscribers. Help us out. Leave a like on the stream. We appreciate all that good stuff. Lots to talk about on the show today. Bengals, of course, play a game in a couple of days against the Baltimore Ravens, AFC North battle. I understand the Bengals are pretty much out of it as it comes to playoff hopes. Only have, 4 wins on the season. Not great, but Joe Burrow making his return to Paycor Stadium. Of course, this is game 3 since he's been back, but game 1 at Paycor Stadium, that is certainly very exciting. And basically every time you see Burrow and Lamar, it kind of lives up to the hype. I understand on Thanksgiving it was a bit one-sided in favor of the Cincinnati Bengals, but this matchup pretty much has always delivered, and I expect it to deliver once again on Sunday in the frigid elements. Probably going to be in the single digits come kickoff at 1 o'clock at Paycor Stadium. Sun will be out, so that's promising. But it's going to be a cold one, and it's going to be some serious AFC North football. We'll see. I don't anticipate to affect the passing game too much. Maybe you see a couple more drops than normal with just the frigid temperatures, but as long as the wind isn't much of a factor, I think you'll still see Burrow and company slinging around on offense. So we'll preview that game. We'll kind of roll through our keys to victory for Cincinnati, some injury report stuff we got to get to as well. It's another thing that kind of makes this so frustrating for Cincinnati, because when you look at kind of the scope of the Bengals team this year as it relates to their health, I mean, they really haven't been that banged up. I understand their quarterback, which is the most important position. He was out for a long time. I don't know. He's been limited in practice. I'd be surprised if he played, but I think there's kind of a possibility he does. Trey, of course, out, but beyond that, you've had most of your team throughout the duration of this year, and it still obviously hasn't equated to wins for this organization. Just kind of add that to the pile of frustrations for this 2025 Bengals team, but we'll preview the game, go through some keys to victory, injury news stuff there as well, and then we will transition to Sharon Moore. We kind of broke down the whole scandal that's transpiring up in Ann Arbor right now. But today we'll roll through some replacements because Michigan's in a really tough spot. We'll kind of just look at the football angle of this whole thing on today's show and roll through a bunch of guys that could ultimately take over as the head coach of the Michigan football team. Tough timing, right? You had the early signing period. You got coaches already signing extensions. You got other coaches already leaving for big-time jobs. Are you going to be able to pry away a guy that just signed in an extension like a Clark Lee or a Mike Elko? I don't think so. So who are you going to go to if you're the Wolverines? We'll run through a bunch of names there, and then we'll shift back to the Cincinnati Bengals. There's some comments I want to get to that were made nationally, and I remember watching the press conference earlier in the week with Joe Burrow. Didn't feel great in the moment watching it, and I was like, oh, this thing is going to absolutely blow up. It's going to be all over ESPN. It's going to be all over Fox Sports. Sure enough, that has been the case. All the national pundits and talking heads, Twitter people, all talking about this with Joe Burrow. I'm not going to go through necessarily my thoughts because we did that on yesterday's show, but I do want to break down what Colin Cowherd and Dan Orlovsky, who two people, by the way, I have a ton of respect for. I think sometimes you see these national pundits or whatever, and sometimes, it's tough to please everybody, but there's a lot of national people out there that frustrate a lot of us fans, right? I think Cowherd and Orlovsky do a tremendous job for the most part. We'll break down what they said and why I disagree with them as well. So that is on tap. And also, how about the game last night? Not going to lie, Buccaneers went up 2 touchdowns, and I said, yep, I'll mail it in for the night. Wake up, Falcons won by a point. And I'm going through that game like, how in the world did that happen, right? Felt like the Buccaneers were going to get ready to take over that division, kind of get a grasp on that division, but Carolina's going to have a chance here this weekend to overtake them. They play the New Orleans Saints, obviously a divisional matchup. Saints are dumpster fire, albeit just beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but great come-from-behind win for the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins looked like Kirk Cousins from a couple of years ago in Minnesota. Granted, that Buccaneer defense is kind of in shambles for Todd Bowles, but we'll roll through that game a little bit if we have some time. And the Buccaneers, they have an opportunity as they play the Panthers twice, but based on what they've done recently, what's to say they're going to beat the Carolina Panthers twice? So that division is very much wide open here as things sit on December 12th. And lastly, as we always do, our best bets of the weekend. We'll close out today's show. Got 5 plays in that one, so make sure you stick around for that. Winning week last week, we've had, I think, 3 in a row here at this point, and we're basically at 500, 2 under 500, so we've lost technically 2 units on the whole year, but we're looking to get in the green. We've made some improvement, got 5 plays here this week. All right, let's start with this game here on Sunday, 1 o'clock, Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens. And, we found ourselves saying this so many times throughout the year. If you just had 1 win, shoot, even if you just beat Buffalo. If you just held on to that game last week and beat Buffalo, you're not in the driver's seat by any stretch of the imagination, but you feel solid going into this game. Obviously, that didn't happen. You lose in heartbreaking fashion, 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter, and here we are, and Joe Burrow has this press conference that's going viral, and he's all down and depressed and dark and sad. Kind of a dark cloud hanging over the organization, and it's going to get a little bit darker if you lose this game. Obviously, Bengals come in as 2.5-point underdogs at home, but I think there's some cautious optimism that Cincinnati's going to have some success in this game. Certainly on the offensive side, is that going to be enough on the defensive side? These teams played a couple of weeks ago, Thanksgiving night. That was kind of the highlight of this year for the Cincinnati Bengals. There haven't been many, right? The first 2 games, yeah, you won, but it wasn't, didn't win with flying colors, right? It was kind of ugly games. You just ended up on the smiling side of the scoreboard. Then that's certainly the Flacco game against Pittsburgh on Thursday night. That was exciting, certainly, but the defense was horrible in that game. That Baltimore game was that was the best moment of this Bengals year here to this point, and you hope it isn't the only good moment, really, when it's all said and done. You hope you get a few more throughout the rest of the way, but it's tough to imagine that it's going to go in that exact same fashion that it went against Baltimore, right? They're in a spot where they just lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We kind of broke down how they lost, kind of got screwed, in my opinion. Should have been a touchdown there to Isaiah Likely, but they ruled it not a touchdown, right? Even though he had the 3 feet down and it was broke the goal line. I didn't understand that. We talked about that earlier in the week on the show, but they're going to be hungry for a victory. It's a Baltimore team a lot of people picked to go to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl going into this year. I thought they were going to win this division and the Bengals were going to be a wild card team. Clearly, I was wrong, as you could argue that none of these teams deserve to make the playoffs in the AFC North, but that's not how it works. One, of course, will get in. So they're going to be very hungry. They're going to be very locked in this game. And from a health perspective, they're in a pretty good spot. They're not too banged up. Bullock, their tackle, he's been out and hasn't practiced. It's personal reasons. I don't anticipate that affecting the game or his ability to play in the game. Mark Andrews, their tight end, he was a limited participant on Thursday. I expect him to play. It's a glute issue. Lamar Jackson, he was full go. He rested earlier in the week. He's had that hamstring. He's had some lower body stuff throughout this year, and clearly hasn't looked like himself, but he's going to start in this game, and he's going to be just fine. And both their corners, our old friend, Cheeto, he's a little bit banged up. He didn't practice on Wednesday. He's got a shoulder. He was a full go yesterday. And Nate Wiggins as well. And he left the game on Thanksgiving against the Cincinnati Bengals a couple of weeks ago. But he is a little bit banged up, but he's going to play in the game as well. So from an injury perspective, not much going on for the Baltimore side. And on the Cincinnati side, Hendrickson, of course, ruled out. He's gotten his surgery. That's not ideal. He's going to be out the rest of the year. T. Higgins, that's kind of interesting. I think there's a world as we sit here live at a little after 11:15 on a Thursday. There's a world where he could play, which, it's a do-or-die game, but that shouldn't factor in at all, right? Concussion protocol, health stuff, but he's been a limited participant. We'll see, ultimately. I think that could go either way. I kind of thought they would rule him out earlier, but there's still, I guess, a chance that he could potentially play in the game. Osai has the shin issue, but he's been a full go all week, and Shamar Stewart has also been a full go there as well, so we'll see him and see if he can provide any production. I wouldn't get your hopes up as it relates to that. So injuries not really a huge factor. Again, Hendrickson out, but we've expected this. We've known this, and we'll have a close eye on the T. Higgins situation, because then we're in a spot. If T doesn't play again, now you're back to, that's only another game that you got with your core 3, right? You only had it in week 1 against Cleveland, and you had it for, a drive or 2 against Jacksonville, and then you had it once here last week against Buffalo, and then maybe that will get taken away immediately, which when you pay all those guys, come together and say, you know what, this is going to be the focal point of our team, and they're not out there, it's very, very unfortunate. But as far as keys to the game go for Cincinnati, again, I mentioned this earlier, you're not going to be able to sit here and say, we'll create 5 turnovers in this game and we'll be just fine. Not going to happen. Obviously, you would like to win the turnover battle, and if you win the turnover battle, you're going to have a good chance to win, but ultimately, you got to play better defense. And I think about the clutch plays, right? And we talked about this earlier in the week. We broke down, Trax did a great job for CLNS Media, clnscincy.com, just kind of a few plays in the game. We had a couple, well, 3 of them were on 4th down, right? When it was 14-3, and then they hit Gabe Davis on the boundary. That was the first down. Then their first touchdown of the game was on 4th down to Shakir, just Josh Allen being absurd. They get the 2-point conversion. There was the 4th down late after the second pick opportunity to perhaps get off the field, and there was the 40-yard run from Josh Allen, and then, of course, the 3rd and 15 run to end the game, to ice the game for Josh Allen there as well. So in the biggest moments, you can break down an NFL game, really a college game as well, and just pick a handful of plays that are huge critical moments in the game. And unfortunately, all of those pretty much went in Buffalo's favor. And I think, obviously, the 2 interceptions played a factor, but those plays, when you have those key plays and you lose pretty much all of them, that hurts you. Now, I understand you played well on 3rd down. You made plenty of big plays of your own offensively, but when you had to pick the biggest plays of that game, even when you had a comfortable lead, all of them were going in Buffalo's favor. And I think ultimately that's what came back to haunt you in this game. So there's going to be those opportunities in this game as well. I think you're going to see an aggressive John Harbaugh. He always is, but I think particularly given, on the road, coming off a bad loss, really needing a win here if you're Baltimore. Cincinnati needs one, of course, but Baltimore, more so in the driver's seat for perhaps winning this division. So they really need one. So you're going to see them be really aggressive. And the Bengals defense is going to be in a lot of 4th down situations, I think, in this game, right? That was kind of the key last week with Buffalo, as they were in 5, I think, and they converted 4 of them off the top of my head. I think that was the case there, maybe 3 of 4. But regardless, they converted a lot more than they didn't convert in the game. Bengals are going to have to be good on 4th down defensively in this one. And I think they've got a better opportunity to do so because clearly, and this continued last week with Lamar against Pittsburgh, where it's like, that doesn't look like Lamar Jackson, right? And when he's not moving around the way we're used to seeing Lamar Jackson move around, that is such an important element to his game. And if you remove that, he's still good from within the pocket, and he's still a really good player, but he's not an all-world player like we're accustomed to seeing with Lamar Jackson. So I expect his mobility to kind of be an issue again in this game. And he ran a little bit on Thanksgiving, certainly, but it didn't look like that same Lamar Jackson where he's out there in the open field and you're like, ain't nobody out of prayer getting him down. Didn't really have that same element to his game, and I would expect that to be similar here against Joe Burrow and against this Bengals defense on Sunday. Now, somebody has to step up in those key moments, right? Whether it be somebody getting to the quarterback or whether it be somebody having some good coverage, getting a PBU, right, or just making a tackle in space. Those are really the 3 things that come to mind. And, Shamar Stewart, we'll see what his role looks like on Sunday. Osai is, went back and forth a little bit on this on off the bench and certainly off the air as well. Real quick side tangent on him. I think based on the contract that he has, 1 year, prove-it deal, the age in which he is, right, 25 years of age, is prime for a pass rusher, and the production that he has as far as pressures, the sack numbers might not be there, but the pressure numbers, he's going to get a lot of people looking at him this offseason. And the term breakout has been thrown out there. I think as far as him getting a big-time deal next year, he's breaking out. But as far as him, being one of the best pass rushers in the NFL or even proving that he's a 1 on a defense, that's not what I mean by breakout. I mean that teams around the league are watching him going, oh, yeah, that age, some of those pressures, the effort that he shows, we're going to give him a big-time contract that's going to be over $15 million per year, in my opinion, right? And I've said at length, I appreciate the effort that he showed. I appreciate the uptick in production we've seen from Osai, but that is not a contract Cincinnati should try to do, right? I think you got to move off of Joseph Osai. But we'll see how he plays in the game. He's going to play a huge role in the game. Him, Miles Murphy, Cedric Johnson, 6th-round pick a couple of years ago. We've talked a lot about Ced. I thought he's been good. We were banging on the table, like, get him in there. And he really didn't play much as a rookie. When he was out there, it was solid. Uptick in activity out there, and he's done a nice job. Been impressed with him. At the end of the day, he's a 6th-round guy, right? It's not a 1st or 2nd-round guy. There's plenty of 6th-round stars across the National Football League, but from an expectation level, probably not fair to say or count on him to be like a starter on your team going forward, but they got to have some good days. Myles Murphy, I understand he's kind of getting back on the good side a little bit of the fan base, but he's got to do a lot more work as it relates to that. And he needs to continue to show improvement here over the course of the next few weeks. The effort, of course, was tremendous on Thanksgiving night, but somebody out of that group needs to step up and play well. And again, Murphy played well on Thanksgiving, needs to do it again here at home. Osai, Cedric Johnson, perhaps Shamar Stewart there as well. Somebody out of that group's got to step up and get some pressure on the quarterback, Lamar Jackson. And the second element, talk about stopping these key plays. Pass rush is an element. Tackles in the open field is an element as well. And when you play the linebacker position, that is why you are out there. Yeah, you're out there to be a leader. Yeah, you're out there to be a communicator. We understand this. But priority number one is you got to be a good tackler. And especially you got to be able to tackle in space as well. And that's something Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter have struggled immensely with throughout their rookie year here in Cincinnati. So are they going to improve when it comes to making a tackle in the middle of the field, right? Can they turn a 7 or 8 yard gain into a 4 or 5 yard gain because they bring down the ball carrier right at that initial contact point? We'll see. They got to step up in this game. And look, Craig and Reed were talking about this, how the Bengals obviously need an overhaul on defense going into next year. I think the old Bengal way would be to, they're rookies. They'll be back to being the starting linebackers next year. I don't think they're going to handle the linebacker position that way. I really don't think they do. And the course of these next 4 games are going to be huge for Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight because they're not going to move off them. They'll be back on the team. But I think there's a world where if they continue not to play well over the course of the next few weeks where they're looking for different starters at that linebacker spot because you just can't continue to go out there and roll guys out there at that linebacker spot that can't tackle, who are a tick late when it comes to recognition and figuring out where they need to be at a given time. That can't happen. And ultimately, they need to get that cleaned up. So the second layer of the defense has to be better. They're going to have opportunities to make plays in space. They got to do it. And then the back end. Right, I thought they were great on the Thanksgiving night against Baltimore. I thought Dax was good. DJ obviously was exceptional. And then the safety spot, they were bad in the game, but kind of got away with it. How are they going to play? But all 3 layers of the defense factor into stepping up in a key moment. And you'll see it watching the game. File it away. I love doing it when I'm watching the game where it's like, well, you know what? This is one of those huge plays. You can always feel it. Whether it doesn't always necessarily have to be a third down. Could be a situation where, you gave up a big play and are you going to bend but not break? Are you going to force a field goal, right? Is it 4th down near midfield? Could this be a situation that swings field position, right? There's going to be about 5 or 6 plays in this game. And, probably when the Bengals are on defense, I would say, that they're going to have to step up and make a play, and somebody's going to have to do it. And they didn't make those plays against Buffalo, and that ultimately is what cost them, coupled with, of course, the 2 interceptions from Joe Burrow. And I think something that allowed you to have success in the game against Baltimore on Thanksgiving ties back into the turnovers, right? They kind of had to move off their run game a little bit. Bengals went into that game giving up over 5 yards per carry. I thought for the most part they did a nice job of, limiting James Cook a little bit in the game last week. But I think Baltimore, they're really going to try to run the football early. And they had to get away with it, away from it, because of the turnovers. And then Cincinnati had a lead and was like, well, we got to score some points to keep up with the Bengals and stay in this game. If they can have success running the ball early, I think that's going to be something they lean on. And they watched the Buffalo game, and they remember what happened on Thanksgiving night as well. They're going to be doing everything in their power to keep the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands, right? And with the weather, with the frigid temperatures, I think you're going to see them play very slow, methodic football, kind of just try to put a stranglehold on this Bengals defense, kind of boa constrictor, suffocate them, right? Try to keep 9 on the bench, run the ball, protect the ball. And there's been games in the past, you got to go back several years because it feels like the past few have just kind of been shootouts. But if you go back a little bit to the early Lamar Jackson days, that's kind of how they played Cincinnati, especially against Burrow early. It was just trying to run the football, be good on 3rd down, and just kind of wear out that defense. And then ultimately they get a situation where they have the ball with 8 minutes left in the ball game, and they just kind of bleed clock, and they work 6 minutes off the clock. They have a lead, and you're like, you're in trouble if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of like what Ohio State did at Michigan almost in the second half. You saw elements to that early on between this Burrow and Lamar Jackson kind of battle. Recently, of course, it's been, chuck it around, shoot out, score a bunch of points. We understand that. But I don't think Baltimore is going to want to get into that kind of game, despite how bad the Bengals defense has been. I think they're going to be focused on running running the ball. And, if you can stop it and force some punts, they're going to have to get away from that. So we'll have a very early tell here in this game because it's going to be cold. They're going to want to lean on Derrick Henry. And if they can have longer drives where they're picking up, positive yardage, avoiding negative plays, avoiding turnovers, they're going to really lean on the run. And that's going to force the Bengals to really not have much room for error on offense if ultimately that ends up being the case. But from an offensive perspective for Cincinnati, more of the same. Right, more of the same. Again, Joe talked about it earlier in the week. He doesn't anticipate, the weather playing too much of a role in this game. Yeah, it's going to be cold. Yeah, it's not going to be, ideal. But once you're out there playing, it's football, and I don't think it's going to impact the passing game too much. As I mentioned at the top, maybe you see a drop or two more than what you're accustomed to, just because the frigid temperatures out there. But I think they're going to sling it around. I think they're going to try to disperse the football. Jamar Chase, of course, seemingly always has a big game against Baltimore. He's going to be a focal point for them. Gesicki. That was awesome. His performance against Buffalo, that was kind of a reminder. Gesicki hadn't really done that. Of course, he had the pec and he was hurt, but he hadn't really done that this year to that game. And that was like, oh, yeah, that's why they brought Gesicki back. Oh, yeah, that's why that when he's out there with Higgins and Chase and Burrow, it's pretty unbelievable. So I would like to see Gesicki get the ball a lot in this game, get the ball in his hands, especially if T's not going to be able to go. Like him to be a focal point. And Bengals didn't really run it well last week with Chase Brown, but I think you're going to see them kind of try to do that. So I think it'll be a very similar plan for Zach and company going into this game, which kind of gives you some cause for concern, right? Because Harbaugh's going to adjust. He knows what they did last time didn't work. 5 turnovers didn't help. But you're going to see a scheme change, or not a full-fledged scheme change, but a plan change for Baltimore from Thursday night to this game. You're probably going to see a very similar one for Cincinnati because it worked, and it's going to come down to being able to adjust on the fly. This is a game that you come into if you're the Cincinnati Bengals where, you're worried about, getting out-coached a little bit in this game. And I think I've made this point several times on the show. Not many games on the schedule where you go into a game and you're like, oh, yeah, we got the better coaching in this game, and that's going to pay off for us late. Not how it really works for the Cincinnati Bengals, and especially in this spot against Harbaugh. On the road, he's going to have them fired up. It's going to be a close game, right? I will be shocked if Cincinnati blows them out like they did on Thanksgiving, or if they get blown out. It's going to be a close game. Coaching is going to play a huge factor, and you got to worry about that, right? When you got Harbaugh going against Zach Taylor in this matchup, he's gonna pull the right strings. He's going to have some changes. I'm a little bit worried Cincinnati's just going to be like, oh, this plan worked great on Thanksgiving. Let's run it back. Let's do the same thing. Don't know if they're going to necessarily be able to get away with that, so that is going to be critical in this game as well. Then Joe's got to be great, right? I think we're going to, for as long as he's here in Cincinnati, that's always going to be, a key, right? I don't think and I don't foresee this ever happening where Joe can go out there and be mediocre and they're going to win. Probably not going to happen. But then again, probably shouldn't happen, right? You're paying him top-of-the-line money, and you're paying 2 of his guys top-of-the-line money as well. So he's got to play well in the game, and I expect him to play well. I don't expect anything from last week or anything from the press conference this week to affect how he plays. I think you're going to see a locked-in Joe Burrow. He's happy to be coming back and playing a home game, right? He made some of those comments about finding the fun again or whatever. Joe Burrow's fired up to play Lamar Jackson at home. He absolutely is, and the people of Cincinnati should be as well. I expect to see a lot of Bengals fans at the stadium. They're early, ready to go. I understand that the playoffs are on the fingertips, as Joe said. Not really. Nobody's thinking about the playoffs. Fans shouldn't be thinking about the playoffs. But at the same time, you should be thinking about December football against Lamar Jackson, trying to ruin their playoff lives and get a big win at home. You need a big win at home, right? The energy is going to be back in the stadium. Again, third game back for Joe. First 2 have been on the road. So I would expect Cincinnati to show up, support their quarterback, support the team, and should be a really fun and exciting game. And I think you saw the Bengals social media team. They released a video. They've been doing these hype videos on a weekly basis, which, by the way, have been great, but they've been losing, so that kind of stinks. But if they had been doing this kind of like in 22 or whatever, or 21, that would have been pretty cool. But they had Joe Burrow as the narrator for the video, and it was, he did this voiceover or whatever, probably around camp many months ago. But don't think it was a coincidence that they used him this week after kind of the press conference and how things transpired earlier in the week. So I expect it to be a really good game. Line, last I checked, was 2.5. Feels like it's going to be whoever has the ball last type of game for the Cincinnati Bengals. They got to protect the ball better. I'm not banging on Joe Burrow for his lack of protecting the football. They were fluky things, but similar to what we said about Josh Allen. if you go into this game, I don't care how good you play throughout the duration of the game, if Joe Burrow turns it over, whether they're his fault or not, twice in the fourth quarter against the Baltimore Ravens, Bengals are going to lose. That's just how it is in the NFL. That's how it should be, candidly. That's how it should be. So Bengals got to be ready to make some plays, and hope they have some, a little bit more creativity than I'm anticipating. Again, I kind of feel like they're going to go in and say, oh, yeah, worked on a couple of weeks ago on Thursday. Let's do it again. I would like to see a little bit, some adjustments made. Baltimore's going to adjust. Cincinnati needs to as well, but should be a fun game. Should be a raucous environment, and hopefully Cincinnati can get a win because, my goodness, they need one, and they need one very, very badly. All right, we'll get back to the Cincinnati Bengals in a second. But I do want to touch on this Jerome Moore stuff. We did a whole segment on it yesterday, kind of breaking down what happened and my general thoughts on the situation. That's up on the channel. If you haven't checked that out already, by all means, go and do so. But today I just kind of want to focus on the replacements aspect of the Michigan job, and then we'll come back to some Burrow stuff here in a second. From a football perspective, if you put everything else to the side, which is very hard to do, and I'm not necessarily suggesting people do that because it's a whole mess, and lots of people's lives are at stake. Bad choices made by several different people. Not good at all for the Michigan football team. But from a football perspective, they got to figure out who the heck their coach is going to be. And I threw out the idea of maybe they let Pogge do it in 26 and go from there. I don't anticipate that necessarily happening, but I do think it is a possibility. So I do want to roll through some names here for Michigan, and I made this point on the show yesterday, but I do want to reiterate, if this was pre-NIL, if this was several years ago, there would be guys leaving their schools right now, even after the early signing period, and even with all the scandals and just general cheating that has gone on, I mean that in multiple different ways, at Michigan. Not the case anymore. Right? Cignetti, for example, he would have been at Penn State pre-NIL, right? And he'd be at Michigan too as well. But I do think, if you're Michigan, you got to do your due diligence. And if you're Ward Manuel, their AD, not quite sure how he still has a job, but I believe he's the one conducting this search. There are those names that you need to call, right? You need to call Cignetti and just give him a ring, right? He's not coming. He ain't leaving Indiana, but give him a call. Same thing for Lanning, right? Anytime a job opens, Dan Lanning gets a call, right? He's not Kirby Ryan Day, but he's right at that next level here at this point. So you give him a call. Marcus Freeman, give him a call. Again, all these names I'm listing here off the top, they're not coming, but you give him a call. Marcus Freeman, the AD at Notre Dame, talked about this earlier in the week that he's like, yeah, we understand it's going to be a year-by-year thing with Marcus Freeman. Everybody's going to want him. Every college job that opens, they're going to want him. And there's going to be a lot of NFL jobs that open and want him too, which for what it's worth, I don't know if he would have much success in the NFL. He's been tied at the Giant job, but that's interesting. But Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame's going to have to deal with this every year. And, that's not a bad thing necessarily. It means you got a really good coach. And he's shown a lot of loyalty to Notre Dame in the past. We'll see if that continues. He's not taking the Michigan job, but if you're Michigan, you're doing everything you can to keep him. There's a couple of top names there as well who recently inked new deals. Apart from Kirk Cignetti, you got Clark Lee and Mike Elko. They're not leaving, right? Lee feels good about Vandy. They just got the top quarterback in the country. They had a great year, 10 wins. Got unlucky. I think a lot of years it's good enough to get in the playoffs. Wasn't this year, but he's clearly happy in Vandy. And think about it from a stadium perspective and a fan base. People always make fun of Vanderbilt because not many people show up to their games. That changed obviously this year, but you're in Nashville, right? There's no reason. Right? If you get some backing from the athletic department, from the donors, and from the school into the football program, there's no reason that you can't have success. You're in Nashville. Come on. That's a great recruiting tool in the portal or a high school kid. You want to come here to Nashville and we're a good team in the SEC? There's no reason that Vanderbilt shouldn't be able to keep this going. Diego Pavia deserves basically all the credit for doing this, and Clark Lee, of course. But he's not leaving Vandy. He's happy there, and they're building something really special in Vandy. I truly believe that. Same with Elko, right? What he's done to that program, the stability that he brought after Jimbo Fisher, they were kind of a mess. Always got recruits, always had money, but nobody could tie it together. Elko has done that. We'll see how if they have success. They got to play Miami in the playoff. I think a lot of people have them on upset alert, but Elko's not leaving. Those are kind of the names that you got to reach out to. You got to call. You got to put your feelers out. See how they're doing. Do your due diligence on those guys. And DeBoer, you can throw his name in there as well. Give him a call. He's not leaving, right? Penn State tried to do, there were rumors about the Penn State job. That wasn't happening. Michigan job's a better job than the Penn State job. I understand that, but he ain't leaving Alabama for Michigan, especially with all the controversy and all the stuff and just getting accomplished what he's gotten done here in a couple of years at Alabama. But those are all names you call. They're all going to turn you down. Dillingham. To me, I wouldn't say he's one, but he might be two. We'll get to my number one candidate here in a second. But Kenny Dillingham, he said he's not leaving Arizona State. Most people, it's not always true, but for the most part, everybody's got a price, right? And, Michigan, the pageantry of the program, obviously they're in a horrible spot right now, but the rivalry with Ohio State, it's looked at as one of the most proud, football teams in the country. I mean, you're in the big house, the biggest stadium, tons of donors, right? Lots of money to work with in NIL. That would be intriguing for Kenny Dillingham, and I think they need to go after him, right? He's had great success at Arizona State. That's his alma mater. He went there. If he didn't go there, he definitely would be at Michigan, but he's losing his quarterback. They had a nice run in the playoff last year, won a playoff game, of course. I don't know if that kind of feels like a one-off. He's a good coach. He deserves a lot of credit for that. But I think he could be, at a big-time school, and he's seen it up close at Oregon, and he should be intrigued by the Michigan job. And that's a guy I'm calling. I do think there could be a chance that they land him despite, his comments about being loyal to Arizona State. That's a name to monitor. Jesse Minter, of course, was the DC for Harbaugh when they won the national title. He's, a younger guy, up-and-coming guy, done great work with the Chargers as the DC. By all accounts, he loves the NFL. But again, this isn't, taking the Arkansas job. No disrespect to that. Or, taking one of these other jobs. This is taking the Michigan job. It's a big job, right? And I do think there might be a little bit of intrigue there from Minter. I think for me, if I was a coach, this is just me speaking, and if I was at the college level and then I went to the NFL, it would be hard to go back to college, especially after having success in the NFL. Because the recruiting is just, it is a 365-day, 24-hour job. And with the NIL and these kids and they're millionaires and not even 18 years old a lot of time, that's a lot to deal with. That's a lot on your plate. I would imagine he feels pretty good in L.A. And mark my words, at some point he's going to get head coaching love in the NFL. So I don't know if he would come back. But again, it's Michigan. It's not Arkansas. It's not Penn State, right? It's a big-time job. We understand that. He's next up. Here's another one for you. Bryant Haynes. Who the heck is that? Well, he's the Indiana defensive coordinator. How did he do against Ohio State? Yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty impressive what he was able to do in Indianapolis. He's been a Cignetti guy. He's followed him around for a long time. He's been great. Indiana for a couple of years. Was at James Madison with him. Was at Elon with him. Hasn't been really getting much buzz, but when you perform like that against the number one team in the country in the Big Ten championship game, and if you back that up by beating either Oklahoma or Alabama and then winning maybe even another game after that, there's going to be some people that are interested in your services. That's kind of a wild card name to monitor, but I think Michigan should go defense. That's just kind of feels like Michigan. That's just kind of the principles they're built on. Offense, very important, and their offense has been incompetent really the past few years. But you need a tough, physical, defensive-minded guy if you want to have success in the Big Ten, if you want to have success against Ohio State, and I feel like that is the direction in which they should go. And here's the guy I think they should hire. Here's the guy that I'm going after if I'm Ward Manuel, their AD, and the guy that I'm trying to bring in as the next head coach, and that is Glenn Schumann. And he is the defensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs. He was at Alabama. He went to Alabama. He was around the team. He was a GA in the Nick Saban era. It's been around 6 national titles, right? Was a linebackers coach for Kirby for a while before becoming the defensive coordinator. Was a co-defensive coordinator before that. He's done a tremendous job. If you look at Georgia's defense at the beginning of this year to where they're at now, it is crazy how he has developed those guys. He's a young guy. He's 35 years of age. The only question is that he's, an SEC guy, Alabama and Georgia, right? But I think when you're a defensive-minded guy, like Kirby's style, that would work in the Big Ten. There's no question. Like Kirby could coach in the Big Ten. Kirby, of course, the best coach in the country, but he would have great success wherever he went. I think Schumann would have success in the Big Ten with his style of football, and I think that would be the top guy, top realistic guy I would be going after. Hasn't been a head coach in the past. That's concerning. So you're kind of going the Dan Lanning route a little bit there where it's a huge job and he hasn't been a head coach. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that. But he has had a ton of success at Alabama at all those roles. He's had a ton of success at Georgia in all those roles. And he's just, grad assistant, right? And he was a grad assistant for several years, right? Other assistant, position coach, coordinator. He's just kind of trending like this. I think he'd be ready to take a head coaching job. He's young. He's 35. I think he could do it. I think he could coach in the Big Ten. I think he's got that edge about him that you need. If you're at Michigan, you got to go up against Ohio State and, other Big Ten schools as well. Glenn Schumann would be the top of my list if I'm Ward Manuel, top of my realistic list to be the next head coach. Jed Fish. This to me is if you're just looking for stability, right? Kind of similar to the Raiders hiring Pete Carroll, which has blown up in their face. Not Pete's fault by any stretch, but they were like, we're a total mess right now. We didn't get Ben Johnson. We thought we were going to get Ben Johnson. It didn't work out. We just need somebody that knows what they're doing to come in here and try to stabilize this thing. That's why they hired Pete Carroll. Hasn't worked out that way, as the Raiders are still very much a mess, and you could argue maybe more of a mess. But that was kind of the mindset when they made a hire like that. Jed Fish has been around. He has won at Arizona. He's winning at Washington. Is he going to take you to national titles? Probably not, but he's going to win 9-10 games. He's going to bring some stability back. He's going to follow the rules. He's not going to have any scandals, and that's just the word that comes to mind, stability with Jed Fish. And a lot of people going into this year were like, yeah, Napier's going to get fired at Florida. He could be the Florida head coach. There was some buzz around that. Didn't end up materializing. They went in a different direction, but I think Jed Fish comes in, can calm everything down, be a professional, be an adult in the room, not have to worry about him doing anything stupid, right? And go out there and, just put this program back on its feet a little bit. He can recruit pretty well as well. And Jed Fish would be a safe hire. Jed Fish is not a swing and miss hire. Glenn Schumann, there's some risk there. Even Kenny Dillingham, some risk there. With the age, they're young guys, whatever. Jesse Minter, risk there. Yeah, the upside might not be where you want with a guy like Jed Fish, but I don't think there's as much risk. Couple of more names before we move on to the Burrow stuff. Dan Mullen, I'm throwing him in here. I would be shocked if they went Dan Mullen. He's not he doesn't love recruiting, right? And if you're at Michigan or Ohio State or one of these premier programs, you gotta love recruiting just as much as you love coaching, right? So, he was in the SEC, Florida, Mississippi State, didn't end well at Florida, and then ultimately goes into TV for a little bit, comes back into coaching, and boom, UNLV having a lot of success. It just comes down to whether or not he would want a job like that. Like, does he really want to get back into real-time college football, or is he cool in Vegas, winning 10 games, playing in bowl games, hanging out in Las Vegas, being happy? He might be cool with that. I'm not quite sure, but I threw Dan Mullen in there. If he truly wants it and wants to go all in, maybe he could have a chance, but I don't know. He feels like an SEC or like a West Coast guy. I don't know if he's really a Big Ten football guy, and he's a long shot, but based on the year he's having at UNLV, I threw him in here. Two more. Brian Daboll is one of them. Rumors about him in the Penn State job. He kind of got the short end of the stick with the Giants. I don't understand how he got fired and the GM didn't. You want to fire both of them, fine, but Joe Shane's sticking around, head scratcher for me. He could get an offensive coordinator job in the NFL next year. Very confident in that. I think there's even some people that think he might get a head coaching job in the NFL. I don't think he would this next year, but I think at some point he'll get another chance. Like Robert Saleh, at some point he'll get another chance. Brian Daboll, I think at some point will get that second chance. I don't know if it's this year. Do you want to go back to college? He's an NFL guy, right? He spent had a cup of coffee in Tuscaloosa with Nick Saban, but for the most part, he's been an NFL guy. And for me, if you're Brian Daboll, do you want to be an OC in the NFL and potentially get back to being a head coach in the NFL, or do you want to be the head coach at Michigan? I don't know. I really don't know. Me personally, I would stay in the NFL, but I definitely think, especially considering the coaches that are going to turn you down, the people that just got extensions, I would call them if I'm the Michigan Wolverines. Lastly, Tommy Rees. Interesting. I think Tommy Rees is one of those guys that would go back to college because I think that was kind of the path he was on, and he kind of skyrocketed at Notre Dame, was the QB coach, then he was the OC. He was a very young dude for Brian Kelly, and then kind of the Notre Dame people freaked out on him where he left for Alabama to be the OC, and then Saban retired, so he was kind of in a tough spot. He leaves his alma mater, Notre Dame, where he played solid football for him, by the way, as well, to go be with Nick Saban, and then Saban retires right after that, so he's only there for a year, and there was some, turmoil there certainly with, working for Nick Saban and some of the lack of success they had offensively that year with Jalen Milroe. Then he goes to the Browns. He's the tight ends coach, I believe. Now ultimately he's calling plays for Kevin Stefanski, and, that Browns operation is a total mess. We'll see what they do. We'll see if Barry gets fired or Stefanski or what dominoes fall as it relates to that, but I don't know. If I'm a Michigan fan, they hired Tommy Rees. I've got a lot of concern, But, he was trending in a great direction, and he would have stuck around and been the OC for Bama for a little bit longer, and I think it would have worked out. It's like with Ty Simpson, for instance. If he was calling the plays and Ty Simpson was the quarterback, I think, people would view Tommy Reese a little bit differently than what they do. But, the Browns' whole thing is a total mess right now. I don't really blame him for that. Shedeur was solid last week, so we'll see how he continues to develop. But that's a guy that might jump back to the college ranks. He's a younger guy. There's risk there. Has never been a head coach. I would go the Glenn Schumann route before the Tommy Reese route, but he is a quarterback. Sometimes it's good to have that quarterback be the coach. You've had a lot of success with that, but that's another name to monitor there as well. But to me, you want to be safe. You want to not flop on your face, Jed Fish. But I think the best, if I'm Ward Manuel, Michigan, top guy for me, besides the Signettis and the Marcus Freemans and the Kalen DeBoers, would be Glenn Schumann, defense coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs. All right, I want to talk about Joe Burrow here a little bit. Talked about him yesterday. We kind of reacted to his press conference on yesterday's show, and I have my thoughts on that. That's up on YouTube if you haven't checked that out already. But as I mentioned, watching the press conference, first thing is, that's not great. First thing that pops to mind. Second thing is, the internet and the national media is going to go crazy with the story. And that's exactly what's happened. Colin Cowherd, you can say what you want about these national pundits that go up nationally and have these shows each and every day. I don't know any guy that gets a ton of love from everybody. Like, some people are going to love you, some people are going to hate you. That's just the nature of the business. I think Cowherd's the best, personally. I really like watching him. I think his takes are well thought out. Is he wrong a ton? Absolutely. Does he say some outlandish stuff? Yes, absolutely. But for the most part, I would say Cowherd's probably the best, right? And he had some comments that he made about Joe Burrow that I didn't agree with, right? One thing he said is in the pocket. He goes, yeah, Joe Burrow might be the best quarterback in the NFL in the pocket. And I agree, but I also think he's the best quarterback in the NFL, full stop. And he alluded to third down and fourth down and making plays in critical moments. He's totally right, but I would just say he's the best quarterback in the NFL, full stop. And it's funny because, nationally, Joe Burrow gets hurt, and people talk about him for a couple of days. Joe Burrow got hurt again, and then you don't hear a peep about Joe Burrow. You don't hear a peep about the Cincinnati Bengals, and they're sitting there talking about the AFC North, talking about Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson, and nobody's even saying, well, if Joe Burrow was healthy, I think the Bengals actually would be the best team in the AFC North. Nobody's saying that nationally. Then all of a sudden he comes back, nobody giving him a chance on Thursday against Lamar Jackson, and then plays really well in that game, plays really well against Buffalo. Not many people really giving the Bengals a chance against Buffalo either. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to get back on the Joe Burrow bandwagon. This has happened so many different times in this Joe Burrow era where he gets hurt, people write him off, forget about him, Bengals come in, they're underdogs, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, Joe Burrow, actually he's the best, or one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the National Football League. So that always humors me a little bit nationally when people forget, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, Joe Burrow is the best. He's been that, right? He's just had some issues staying healthy. One thing that Cowherd kept saying, and I thought this was the just total wrong angle to take. Burrow clearly was frustrated, sad, angry, depressed, all those things in his press conference. And Colin's whole thing was that, well, if you're a quarterback and you've won 8 of your last 9 games and you're acting like that, that's not good, right? That's not good. He didn't play the last 9 weeks. I would agree with him if he had won 8 of his last 9 games and they were all this year. That wasn't the case. He got hurt from a toe injury, a turf toe, that cost him much of this season. Right? So I didn't understand that from him at all, where he's like, he's not acting very happy. He's won 8 of 9. He was hurt and had to go through the rehab process again, and his team only won 1 game when he was out, right? So that to me was just the total wrong angle to take there with Joe Burrow. And then he goes on to say this, and this is kind of a tired narrative when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals. He goes, Joe Burrow's not happy about his linebackers missing, or not unhappy about his linebackers missing tackles in space. He's unhappy that his organization isn't a serious organization, and they're a cheap organization. They don't have a competent front office with a bunch of dudes in there. It's just a handful of guys. That's what Cowherd had to say about that. And my reaction is, well, that's like, how often are you guys going to do this, right? How often are you guys going to do this? And let's not act like this Bengals organization has not done every single thing that Joe Burrow has asked. Literally, right? I mean, maybe you could say, he vouched certainly for Jesse Bates. That didn't happen. But for the most part, they have said, Joe, yes, we will do everything in our power to do what you want, right? And that's not, you don't see many teams. Like, think about Tom Brady in New England, right? Well, he didn't really say anything. He didn't really go out and say, I want this, I want that. But you don't see this with quarterbacks going out and saying, hey, I want this, and then organizations doing it. It doesn't really work like that. The players play, the coaches coach, and the GMs handle personnel stuff. Bengals have pretty much done everything that he has asked. And, everybody says, well, okay, yeah, they signed T. Higgins. Yes, that's huge, right? I've made this point several times on the show. T. Higgins was gone, right? They tagged him. He was ticked off. They got in a little dispute, and they was like, screw it, I'm going to play, and then I'll be a free agent, and then we'll move on. And then Joe said, actually, no, T's a need. And he was very clear. It wasn't like, yeah, I would like to have T back. It was, we need T back. T. Higgins is a need. And the organization pivoted, and they said, oh, you know what? We don't want to take him off. We'll bring T. Higgins back. So that's one thing. But it's not just that. Go all the way back to after he got hurt his rookie year, right? There was real dialogue and real conversation, and there was the memes or the graphics or whatever you want to say on social media, Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell, right? I think there was a real world where the Bengals were considering taking Penei Sewell. And I think you could make the argument that despite all the success that Jamar Chase has had, could you be better off if you had Penei Sewell? I'm not going to say that, but I think it's, an interesting thing to monitor because look at Penei Sewell. Have you seen him play? He's probably one of the best, if not the best tackle in the National Football League. But he was banging the table for Jamar. And what had he done at that point, right? Yeah, he looked like a franchise guy before he got his knee hurt, but it's not like he was an MVP guy before his knee got hurt, and he was just a rookie and hadn't even played a full season. And the Bengals said, you know what? We're going to make Joe happy. This guy that really hasn't proven much and is coming off a huge injury, we're going to make him happy and take Jamar Chase. So there was that, right? The Gesicki stuff. Oh, we want Mike G back. What did they do? They got Mike G back. Oh, Trey, we need to have him back. They didn't give him a long-term deal, but they gave him a raise. They made him happy, and he was ready to go come week one. So they have done everything that he has asked. So if you're Joe Burrow, I understand that the competency level of this organization, it sounds like I'm defending the Bengals ownership group, which I'm absolutely not. But from Joe's perspective, how can you be mad at them? They've done everything you've asked, and it hasn't equated to win. So I don't understand. It's just kind of a lazy narrative to sit there and say, oh, Joe, he's mad at the organization. I get the organization isn't good. I get they're a mess. I get they're a total dumpster fire. But the things that he's asked them to do, for the most part, they've done. They've kind of bowed down to him and said, Joe, yep, we'll do that for you. We'll do that for you. So if he's going to want to spin around and say, oh, you know what, I'm actually mad at you, I don't know if he's necessarily in a position where he can go out there and do that. And then there's the offensive line stuff, which you look at the numbers, overall pass block grades over the course of the past few years, not good, right? Or not the past few years, since he was here in Cincinnati, not good, right? High 20s, low 30s, worst in the NFL. But I hear Schefter and guys talking about that now. Well, let's talk about the offensive line this year, right? The offensive line this year is protecting, right? Are they the best offensive line in pro football? No, but they are doing their job. They are protecting. They asked Joe at his press conference, is this the best offensive line you've played with in your career? And he said yes, and he didn't think twice about it. So all these national people are like, oh, Andrew Luck is getting hit too much. Yes, when you look at his whole career, he's gotten hit way too much. But when you look at this year, especially since he's come back from injury, offensive line is playing well. So I don't understand that at all, to be perfectly honest with you. And the 8-1 thing, it's just like 8-1 in his last 9 starts. He missed the majority of this year to this point, right? I think, and I said this point on the show yesterday, Joe Burrow, and he talked about not having as much fun. I think when he's out there, Jamar said this, he's like, the narrative you guys are trying to spin, I don't understand it, right? I think he's still, in the building each and every day. He loves being a football player, right? He might go to the podium and say those types of things, but he loves being a football player. But I think the true fun that he has is going on postseason runs, right? Chasing a Super Bowl. And he hasn't even felt that for several years now. And I think that's why you're seeing the frustration. And again, some people shake their head at the timing of like, oh, that's weird. Why is it happening now? Well, what I was saying after the Chicago Bear game, what many of you were saying before that, and what some of you guys were saying after that, was that, oh, the season's over. He didn't really have that realization until this week. So that thought process that I had after the Bear game, that many of you had before then, right? He's just now experiencing that, which I think is why you're seeing the reaction kind of play out the way he did. So Cowherd, for the most part, I'm not going to say I always agree with him, but for the most part, it's well thought out. It's well said. But this was like, what do you mean? You're like, he was hurt, and he's been hurt a million times, and he's a human being. Obviously, that's got to be frustrated to get hurt this many times, come back, play really well, and still not be good enough to get into the playoffs. I think that's where some of that frustration comes to. Then Orlovsky. There's a lot of people at ESPN who are, don't necessarily agree with a lot of them. I think Dan Orlovsky is tremendous. He does great work, breaks down the quarterback play great, breaks down the game great. He's great on the broadcast, right, when he's on Monday Night Football. He's tremendous. But he said Joe Burrow obviously no longer wants to be in Cincinnati. And come on, that's aggressive. That is very, very aggressive. You're going to say that after one press conference where he was a little ticked off and depressed, right? You can't say he obviously no longer wants to be in Cincinnati. And I understand, look, we're in this business too, whereas you got to say stuff that makes people's ears perk up. And you got to say stuff that makes people tune in. And credit to Orlovsky, people who are tuning in to those comments. And he also mentioned, like, if I'm the Jets or if I'm the Raiders or if I'm the Steelers, I'm doing everything in my power to try to trade for Joe Burrow, right? And Reed said there's a price for everything. He said, 12 first-round picks, they would do it. Well, let's live in reality here. Nobody's giving 12 first-round picks. I don't care how good the quarterback is. But 5 first-round picks, that's a little bit more reasonable. Mike Brown ain't taking 5 first-round picks. Katie Blackburn ain't taking 5 first-round picks. They are not moving Joe Burrow, right? And he's here under contract through 29. And if he refuses to sign an extension before that, they're going to franchise tag him, right? And I don't anticipate Joe making this thing ugly. I really don't. And, I was a young kid when Carson Palmer was doing his whole thing. And I was sad because I absolutely loved Carson Palmer, but he had a little bit more of an edge to him, right? And I think you kind of could see that coming a little bit more. All right, now we'll see. If you win a handful of games and Joe Burrow continues to play great next year and the year after that, maybe. But there's no reason to sit here and talk about him not playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. The retirement thing I think is ridiculous as well, but there's a higher chance that he retires than he demands a trade, right? And I don't think either likelihood is high whatsoever, but if you had to pick between the two, it would be that, right? Now, maybe a couple years down the line, you continue to lose, maybe then he demands one. He's not going to demand a trade this offseason. That would be absolutely ridiculous. And if he did, congrats. You're not getting traded. The Bengals are not trading him. They're going to sit here. They might laugh in his face, actually, if he did. And candidly, I might laugh here at the microphone, right? They ain't moving him, right? It's one of the best. I mean, Zach Taylor, how many times has Zach Taylor said it? Yeah, wouldn't trade him for anybody in the league. Wouldn't trade him for any amount of draft picks. Rams might throw 5 at you. That's great. Not trading him for 5. Reed said 12. Let's live in reality. And nobody's giving 12 first-round picks. I think 5 for Joe Burrow could happen, right? Maybe even 6. But not going to happen. Absolutely not going to happen. So I thought some of those comments were certainly interesting from some national people. We knew it was going to happen, but it's just the narrative to me is just lazy, right? I understand the ownership group is terrible. I understand they're incompetent. I understand they drag things out longer than they need to be dragged out. But I don't think Joe Burrow really can be super ticked off at them. He can be super ticked off at not winning games. But everything that he's wanted, they've asked. He's getting paid an absurd amount of money. So I just don't think that, you can sit there nationally if you're not around the team or you're not in the city and say, oh, yeah, he's really mad at the organization. He's mad they're not winning. The organization's done everything that he's asked. All right. Couple more minutes here on the show. We are going to dive into our best bets of the weekend. Thursday Night Football, obviously, I went to bed before the end of the game, and 2-score lead for Tampa Bay late in the fourth quarter, and boom, Atlanta comes back and wins. Credit to Raheem Morris. I've been kind of dragging him through the mud a little bit, but a decision to go for it on, I believe it was 4th and 14, basically saying, I don't care if we lose, we're going to try to win. Right, and credit to him. Kirk Cousins played well in the game, looked like old Kirk Cousins. Again, wasn't playing the Seattle defense, wasn't playing the Denver defense, but deserves a lot of credit for going out there and playing good football. And he flat out played better than Baker in the game. He absolutely did. So credit to the Atlanta Falcons for a huge win. All right, let's do our best bets of the weekend. It is our final segment on our show each and every week. We look forward to it. We were 3-2 last week. We are 34, 36, and 3 on the year. So we're right there. We just need another winning week. Let's see if we can do it. We'll start with the Army-Navy game. I'm going to say go Navy, beat Army. I'm laying the 6 points in this game. Navy -6. Navy's got a bit of a passing attack. They can run the ball. I think they're better coached. I think they've kind of dominated this rivalry here over recent memory. I like the midshipmen in this game. It's kind of an interesting game. It's the only game on typically, right, this week, and, you tap in for it, and, it's not always the most exciting game in the world. The pageantry of it is great. The support that it gets from, the members of the military, certainly, and the people that go to those respective academies is great, and I think Navy controls this game. I think it's just too much for Army, and they score enough points in this game to cover the number. Give me Navy -6. All right, I don't believe in jinxes, but I guess I'll knock on wood for the rest of you guys that do. Every time we've taken the Bengals this year, they've covered. We're going to do it again. Cincinnati +2.5. Joe Burrow returns to Paycor Stadium, and it's going to be electric, right? The Bengals are in a spot where, there's not much optimism. They've only won a handful of games, but it's Bengals-Ravens. It's winter football. It's going to be cold as heck there at the game. Burrow's making his return. I expect the crowd in the city to show up and show out for this game. I expect it to be a very competitive game. I think there's a lot of value in Cincy on the money line. I think they probably win by a field goal. But give me the Bengals +2.5. See if we can't keep this streak alive as far as betting on the Bengals and them going out there and covering the spread. I'll take the Chiefs here in this spot against the Chargers. The Eagles are a mess, and the Chargers were just barely able to capitalize in that game just because the Eagles are a complete disaster here at this point. But Herbert clearly not 100%. They had to ask him to run a bunch in the game against Philly, which I don't know, you don't want to be doing that a ton. He has the ability to do it, but that's not great. He's got the left hand. It's broken. They got injuries all over their offensive line. I don't know if they have enough guys that can make plays down the field. Quentin Johnson kind of started out strong. He's shown some good elements, but recently hasn't been very good. McConkey is an outstanding player, but as far as a down-the-field threat, don't really see it. Don't think they're going to have much success running the ball in Kansas City there either. They're technically the better team, right? They have the better record. They're in a better spot. Chargers probably going to go to the playoffs. Chiefs probably not. I like the Chiefs in this spot. I'll lay the 5.5 points. Arrowhead Stadium. Look, they don't want to go out sad, right? They're going to be locked in for this game to try to get a win. Like, the last thing they want is to not have a winning season. So you're going to see a very focused Patrick Mahomes, very focused Andy Reid. The crowd's still going to show out at Arrowhead Stadium. Still going to be a significant home field advantage. I like them to win by about a touchdown. I'll lay the 5.5 points. Carolina. New Orleans just had a huge win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Carolina goes on the road, and now all of a sudden they have a real shot. All right, they've always had a shot, but now they can see it, right, as far as winning the NFC South. I'm going to lay the 2.5 points with the Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young, consistency is certainly not there, but when he plays well, looks pretty good out on the football field. Canales, I was never a Canales guy. I never really believed in him, but he's doing his job, right? I mean, the Panthers have, 7 wins? Who would have thought that, if we're being completely honest here? So they deserve some credit for that. Rico Dowdle has kind of been their chess piece, has kind of been their X factor. And, in the game against Dallas, or not, who were they playing? When they were on Monday Night Football, I don't remember exactly who they were playing off the top of my head right now. Maybe it was Dallas, maybe it was Tampa, not quite sure. But they said, it was the Niners. That's who it was. It was the San Francisco 49ers. And they had so much success running the football, and then it was like, we want to show everybody that we can throw it around 50 times. And it was horrible, and it didn't work, and Bryce Young played a horrible game, made some turnovers, didn't work out. Run the football. That's what you're good at. Hand it off to Rico Dowdle. And if you do that, you're a better team than the New Orleans Saints. Shuck has settled in a little bit, but he's not the answer at the position. And I expect Carolina to win with a huge opportunity to take control of the NFC South. Give me Carolina -2.5. And I'll take the Packers as well. The Packers have been a horse for us all year. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it feels like when we take the Packers, they win, they cover. I've got them again in this game at Denver. They're favored. 2.5 points. Public's all over the Broncos here in this spot. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Broncos defense is for real. Jordan Love's been playing great, but I don't think he's going to score a ton of points on Denver. But I don't think Bo Nix is going to score many points at all in this game. So I like a low-scoring game, but I like the Packers to win and cover and kind of show that they're chasing the Rams a little bit for that number 1 overall seed in the NFC. Give me Green Bay -2.5. 5 plays, Navy midshipmen. Go Navy, beat Army. -6. Bengals +2.5 at home. Chiefs -5.5 at home against the Chargers. Panthers -2.5 at New Orleans. And Green Bay -2.5 at Denver. Appreciate everyone, as always, for hanging out with us here at the show. Another great week. A couple of great guests. Had Coach Patino for the Xavier Musketeers, and Travis Steele joined me on my show yesterday to talk Miami Redhawks basketball. Undefeated starts of the season. Let's see if they can continue that here this weekend. The Cats are in action. Cincinnati. They play Georgia. And that's a big game for Wes Miller. That's a big game for the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball team, and we'll see how they respond there. Xavier in action tonight against Missouri State, and we'll see if they can get that positive momentum still rolling here. Heavy favorites in the game, as they should be, but we'll see if there's a bit of a hangover from the crosstown shootouts or if they're ready to continue to play good basketball. But looking to get some good guests on the show next week. We look forward to that. And as always, make sure you check out our clips on YouTube if you haven't done so already. And follow us on social media. Follow me at StoneShields_ on Twitter. We're closing in on 700 followers. See if we can't make that happen here before Christmas. That would be pretty cool. The channel now is over 100 followers, so that's promising. We're making progress there at the Stone Shields. And then Chatterbox Sports, of course, on Twitter. We've got you covered. Highlights. If you can't watch these college basketball games, our social team does a tremendous job getting all the highlights up there. Clips from our shows. Deals, promotions, whatever you got, clippings from press conferences, news, Reds, Bengals, Bearcats, you name it. It's up on our social, C-Box Sports on Twitter, and I think we're around, 17,000, approaching 18,000 maybe, somewhere in that area. So help us out and follow us on Twitter if you haven't done so already. We're on Instagram as well, at the Stone Shield Show on Instagram, Chatterbox Sports, obviously on Instagram there as well. So help us out as we continue to try to grow what we're doing here at Chatterbox. We've had a good couple of weeks here. It started, back in September. Now it's almost Christmas. Pretty hard to believe, but look forward to another great week next week. And the boys, Craig Sandham will have you covered on Sunday. Casey McAllister makes his return to Chatterbox Bengals there as well. So tune in for that if you want to have a little fun on game day. We'll talk to you on Monday. Who day?